the strategic needs of the nation. The previous administration lacked a realistic national energy security strategy. They wasted billions of dollars reducing reliable energy and making our energy systems ill-prepared to meet this historic moment of the next generation economy. After more than a year at the helm of our energy department, things look very different. Under your leadership, our nation's energy strategy prioritizes core responsibilities of energy and national security, reliable power, affordability, and economic growth. You've charted a path to ensure U.S. leadership in future technologies that are reshaping the global order. Finite taxpayer resources have been shifted to focus on abundant, reliable energy expansion. You've harnessed DOE's computing power to AI to use for societal benefit. You've accelerated work on nuclear technologies, increased collaboration to secure the grid during emergencies, and increased resources on our nuclear deterrent. You've also refocused the department's loan program on energy expansion and reliability. Most of these actions are reflected in DOE's proposed budget. These efforts couldn't come at a more important time. International conflicts and decisive military actions by the Trump administration to protect our nation have put increased pressure on ensuring a secure and reliable energy system. While DOE has diligently worked to focus on essential energy and security priorities, more work remains. Affordability continues to be a key concern facing American families. We'd like to get your perspective today on the impacts on oil prices from the conflict with Iran and what the prospects for more stable supplies would mean. And we should also unpack the forces behind higher energy costs. Average utility bills rose by 11% in 2025 after increasing by 29% in 4 years prior and substantially higher across our nation's bluest states. In fact, recent reports from the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab confirm that far-left policies are driving price increases that are burdening households and businesses. We should examine how misguided policies leave our communities vulnerable when they need electricity the most and what DOE is doing about that. Recent weather events during Winter Storm Fern exposed the risk of over-reliance on weather-dependent energy. DOE's decisive 202C orders and effective emergency planning were critical to protect against blackouts, ultimately saving lives and preventing billions of dollars in economic damage. While mismanaged public policies disrupt our power sector, historic projections of demand growth from data centers and reshoring manufacturing continue to climb. Data centers alone could consume up to 17% of the total electricity, which is also 60% higher than estimates projected in 2024. Importantly, DOE has taken several steps to ensure data centers can connect to the grid in a way that drives down prices and does not burden ratepayers with additional costs. This subcommittee has spent considerable time examining this historic load growth and what type of energy system is needed to fuel data center demand. Without fail, experts across the field have testified that the answer is dispatchable, reliable, and affordable supplies of baseload power. In recognition of these needs, the department has prioritized dispatchable resources that can power next-generation technologies and can keep the lights on when we most need it. Alongside these efforts, the department has focused on ushering in a nuclear renaissance. This ranges from your work to accelerate the development of American nuclear fuel infrastructure and of reprocessing used fuel to your work to demonstrate more new reactor designs. We should examine how your work will dovetail with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's commercial licensing to provide a robust, safe process for nuclear expansion. While the previous administration sought to end the use of fossil fuels, your department has unleashed American energy, like liquefied natural gas, and reversed unnecessary regulations that attack fossil fuel use. I look forward to the discussion today on how your energy and technology priorities will benefit the American people, and I yield back the balance of my time and recognize the gentlelady from Florida, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, the policies of the Trump administration have made life very expensive for our neighbors back home. It is truly soul-crushing what they are experiencing right now. Electric bills are way up. Under the Trump administration, household electric bills have risen as much as 13% nationally, and utilities are imposing massive rate hikes. Trump's war in Iran has sent an energy shock rippling through the economy with huge price spikes. Energy inflation is up 10.9%. That's the highest in 20 years. Gas prices jumped over 21% in March alone, the biggest increase since records began in 1967. Americans are grappling with wildly higher gas and diesel prices, and you know, consumer goods are transported across the country by trucks running on diesel. So folks are bracing for higher costs for consumer goods too. The pain in the pocketbook comes at a rotten time for hardworking Americans. They're already paying more due to arbitrary and illegal Trump tariffs. And over the past few days, Republicans have been celebrating the big, ugly bill. But the impact has been devastating when it comes to energy bills for our neighbors back home. Because to pay for tax cuts for billionaires, Republicans in Congress rolled back many of the clean energy initiatives from the Inflation Reduction Act, which have been helping consumers save on energy costs. The Trump administration and the GOP eliminated tax credits for solar, wind, electric vehicles, and home efficiency upgrades. So altogether, what is happening is you're really sticking hardworking Americans with higher electric bills. And on top of all that, despite higher energy demand, the need to lower prices, the Department of Energy has effectively killed cleaner, cheaper energy projects, some fully permitted and under construction, to the point that the country, in many places, is grappling with a shortage of power, and ratepayers are paying even higher electric bills. And it's troubling that the DOE is making it all the more expensive by forcing expensive, dirty coal plants to stay online, counter to the plans of utilities, state regulators, and grid operators due to the cost of ongoing operation. But do you know who's making out like bandits through all of this? Oil and gas executives. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that Trump's war in Iran is yielding a windfall for Americans' top oil executives, particularly CEOs, who have pocketed, get this, over the past couple months, $1.4 billion. When the Chevron chief executive sold shares, he pocketed $104 million. ConocoPhillips CEO netted about $54.3 million in March alone. The CEO of Baker Hughes sold about $33 million worth of stock during the same month. The Trump administration and fossil fuel executives certainly have consumers over the barrel in more ways than one. You know, this Trump energy crisis almost seems intentional. And this is the context for the president's proposed budget. Aside from the NNSA, you're proposing an 11% cut in areas that help consumers save, like full elimination of the low-income home energy assistance program and the weatherization program that this committee reauthorized in a bipartisan fashion last year. You propose to cut initiatives for critical minerals, geothermal energy, and hydropower. Those are bipartisan that we all support. That seems backwards. As usual, the only thing that the administration reliably supports are polluters. The president's budget proposes $23 million to subsidize the dying coal industry. It requests over almost $2 billion for a new baseload power account to preserve coal, oil, and gas industries. At best, the policy priorities from the DOE and the administration are incoherent. At worst, they pose real risk to U.S. energy reliability and resilience. You know, you've lost a lot of employees. They were doged, they were fired. Now DOE faces a historic labor shortage. It calls into question whether you can administer the law as Congress intended. You've lost so many people that now, rather than address it, you request new power for political appointees alone to make these decisions. And this opens the door to more corruption and grift that has become a hallmark of the Trump administration. This budget does nothing to help hardworking American families. In fact, it actively hurts them. It's a budget that will leave the United States further behind our competitors in the global energy race, while callously telling Americans, good luck to you, as they continue to scrape by. Our neighbors back home deserve better, Mr. Secretary. They deserve cheaper, more affordable, reliable, clean energy. I hope you can answer these questions because we have a lot of them today. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, Lady's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky, the chairman of the full committee, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Glad to have you before us today. Your testimony is especially important given the timely world events and the impact on energy markets. As the Trump administration came into being, and our committee reformed this last year, we were able to get the energy policies in place that got oil down to about $60 a barrel. And that was never anywhere close during the Biden administration where people had affordable access to energy. But we do know with Iran choking the flow of oil, gas, and other critical markets, that has raised the price of energy for Europe, for us, trouble getting products to Europe, to Asia, and other markets. And we're facing a crisis now of energy prices. But the stability and the place we have is $60 barrel of oil. That's where we should get back to when we get beyond where we are. And we've been, the Department of Energy was organized for this specific reason right before the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And we've all long known about Iran's explicit threat to America and to our allies, and we all knew that it had to be addressed, and President Trump has addressed it. But clearly, Iran's disruption of global markets is increasing prices here at home. So understanding how DOE is addressing supply constraints as a result and how its work will help ensure long-term affordability will be part of our discussion today. And of course, there is but one of many pressing issues, China. China still threatens to disrupt geopolitical relationships around the world and to overtake technological leadership, particularly in the race for AI dominance and innovation. And here at home, our nation still faces tremendous new demand for energy. There's a burning need to revitalize an energy system long suffering from misguided policies that undermine reliable, affordable power and prioritize technologies that depend on taxpayer subsidies and handouts. Success requires energy addition. Building the reliable, affordable systems that leverage our abundant sources of energy is critical. So, Mr. Secretary, you testified last year that access, quote, access to an abundant and reliable energy supply is a key ingredient to unlocking prosperity and ensuring human flourishing and innovation, unquote. That's refreshing and powerful message, should be at the center of our nation's energy policy and DOE's technological work. Let's focus on how best to do this. I'll yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Latta. The Trump administration's energy policy, Secretary Wright, has been an absolute failure. Energy prices of all kinds have skyrocketed, energy reliability is under threat, pollution is getting worse for the first time in decades, and Mr. Secretary, it's all the Trump administration's fault. The list of disastrous policy failures from this administration is long, but one of the worst offenses has been Trump's reckless war in Iran. Since day one, there's been no plan. In fact, the strategy changes by the day and by each deranged social media post from the president. First, Trump says he wants to open the Straits of Hormuz, and the next day he says he wants to blockade it. And his erratic policies has sent global oil prices skyrocketing, and American drivers are now paying more than $4 per gallon each time they fill up their tanks, while diesel prices have reached over $5 per gallon. And Trump's war caused the largest monthly increase in gas prices in nearly 60 years, and there's no relief in sight. The average household is expected to spend $740 extra on gas this year. And making matters worse, the Trump administration's initial response was to unleash sanctioned Russian and Iranian crude upon the world, rewarding two of the worst actors on the international stage, including the one the administration is actively fighting a war against. Even in the last week, the president has floated a plan that would allow Iran to collect billions of dollars in tolls for traversing the Straits of Hormuz. And the President Trump started this war promising that the Iranian regime would fall, but clearly that's not happening. This war is an unequivocal disaster brought on by this president. And throughout all this chaos and volatility in the market, Secretary Wright, your social media account was saying that the U.S. was escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz, and then the White House said it wasn't true. I don't know, it just doesn't seem like anybody can get their act together. And you seem more interested in increasing the output of Venezuelan oil producers than addressing energy security challenges here in the U.S. And the Trump administration's energy policy has firmly put America last. So much for the promise of America first. It's America last. And it hasn't just been foreign policy. Republicans' disastrous domestic energy policies have put America last, too. Electricity prices have increased at twice the pace of inflation. Natural gas prices are up 12% since the president took office. Last month, energy prices caused inflation to reach its highest level in 2 years. And tens of millions of Americans are already struggling to afford their power bills, and last year utilities requested $31 billion in rate hikes. And rather than trying to soften the blow for Americans, the Department of Energy, under your leadership, has only made things worse. DOE has attacked energy efficiency standards, canceled or delayed clean energy projects, slowed down important cost-saving programs like the Home Rebates Program and the Weatherization Assistance Program. Just 36 hours ago, my staff received a 40-page list of grants that DOE has decided to retain or modify after leaving these grantees hanging for over 15 months. And these are projects that would strengthen the grid, build out clean energy manufacturing, reduce our reliance on foreign supply chains. But many have not heard a word from the department for over a year, and this period of limbo has seriously jeopardized the viability of many of these projects. I mean, look, the bottom line is you can't rob a bank, then give 9% of the money back and expect a thank you. There isn't going to be any thank you from me. Making matters worse, your administration has directly increased electricity prices by hundreds of millions of dollars in certain regions of the country to keep coal plants online. Unfortunately, as a report last week showed, 3 of those plants you demanded stay online didn't produce a single megawatt of power, and yet American families in those areas are seeing their electricity shoot through the roof. It's a perfect summary of the Trump administration's policies with high costs and 0 benefits. So, Secretary, during your time at the Department of Energy, there has been a drastic and unprecedented decline in energy security and affordability for all Americans. And today's hearing is about ensuring that you're held accountable for what's happening on your watch and not continuing the steep price increases that American families face every day. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and this concludes member opening statements. The chair reminds members that pursuant to committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. Also, just to, I think all the members already know, we have 4 vote series today. We have one coming up at 11:30. They're anticipating not getting off the floor until 12:15. We have a 1:30, 3:15, and a 5 o'clock. And so, as always, when we end the second or the first vote series and the last vote, we'll be back in our seats 10 minutes after the vote is called. Also, as everyone knows, I'm going to have to make sure that I'm cutting people off at 5 minutes so members can keep getting all members can get their questions in. So be cognizant of that, because I will gavel at 5 minutes on your questions. Again, we want to thank the Secretary for testifying before us today, and you will have an opportunity to give an opening statement followed by a round of questions from our members. And our witness for today's hearing is the Honorable Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy. Mr. Secretary, we appreciate you being here today, and you are recognized for 5 minutes for an opening statement, so just pull that mic up close, and we appreciate you being with us.
Chairman Lauda, Ranking Member Castor, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the President's fiscal year 2027 budget for the Department of Energy. Under President Trump's leadership, we have put the department back on mission, delivering affordable, reliable, and secure energy for the American people. Let me highlight what that looks like. We have taken decisive steps to restore grid reliability. Using emergency authorities under Section 202C of the Federal Power Act, we kept baseload critical generation online after DOE analysis warned outage risk could increase by 100-fold by 2030 if we had continued the Biden administration policies. This action and the critical market response to our action preserved 17 gigawatts of critical dispatchable generation for the American people. Hundreds of American lives were saved by these actions during Winter Storm Fern. Historic cold drove record heating and electricity demand. Dispatchable energy, natural gas, coal, hydro, and nuclear were the MVPs of the grid. In New England, at peak demand, hydrocarbons, hydro, and nuclear provided 95% of power. Wind, solar, and batteries combined provided 2%, less than burning wood and trash. The lesson? When reliability is on the line, dispatchable energy shows up. We have worked to establish American energy leadership globally. Since President Trump ended the previous administration's reckless LNG export approval ban, the department has approved more than 19 BCF a day of new export authorizations, which is more than the entire capacity the United States had on Inauguration Day last January. The United States is the global leader in LNG exports and will become even more dominant under President Trump's leadership. This is a win for America, a win for our allies, a win for global energy security, and a blow to our adversaries. We are advancing national security at home and abroad. From day one, President Trump has focused on delivering prosperity at home and peace abroad. Occasionally, power must be projected to create long-term peace. American national security is anchored by our nuclear deterrent. DOE's National Nuclear Security Administration is honored by this mission to ensure a safe, secure, and effective deterrent against new and evolving threats. Today, NNSA is delivering more new weapons, 7 warhead modernization programs, and plutonium pits than ever since the Cold War. We are driving a nuclear power renaissance. Our efforts span next-generation reactor pilot programs, reestablishing American nuclear enrichment capacity, domestic nuclear fuel fabrication, reprocessing, and a pathway to spent fuel permanent storage. I am proud to share that we will have multiple advanced reactor prototypes critical by America's 250th birthday this July 4th. We are driving hard to meet President Trump's goal of quadrupling nuclear capacity to 400 gigawatts by 2050. This ensures nuclear energy will play a central role in powering America's reindustrialization and leadership in AI. Our budget request reaffirms our commitment to cleaning up nuclear waste in communities that carried the weight of America's earliest nuclear programs. We are bringing professional management and innovation to enhance cleanup efforts, while seeking to redevelop cleaned-up sites like Portsmouth, Paducah, Hanford, and others. We launched the Genesis mission to bring AI's immense promise to scientific and technological innovation. In our nation's history, there have been 2 great scientific mobilizations, the World War II Manhattan Project and the Apollo space program. The Genesis mission is the third. Genesis mission is focused on the most difficult scientific challenges of our time: quantum computing, fusion energy, advanced materials development, and human health. We are partnering where industry alone cannot go, tackling long-term challenges that require national commitment, bringing together our national laboratories, universities, and private industry to accelerate scientific discovery. We are winning the AI race and lowering energy costs. By leveraging department-owned land and assets, we are enabling rapid deployment of large-scale compute capacity through public-private partnerships. We are working closely with industry and communities to ensure these projects adhere to the President's important ratepayer protection pledge to rapidly expand our nation's electricity grid and end the Biden administration's ruinous rise in electricity prices. We are securing critical minerals. We have strategically reorganized the department, consolidating 5 offices into a single Office of Critical Minerals and Energy Innovation. This creates one hub across DOE, the national labs, and external partners to manage the full supply chain, from mining and processing to magnets and batteries.
And pardon me, Mr. Secretary, if you could just wrap up,
Yep.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, finally, we're preparing for the future. America is open for business, and again, trillions of dollars are being invested in American infrastructure for manufacturing and AI. As Secretary of Energy, I'm honored to lead this effort for President Trump and to work with this committee to strengthen America's energy future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony, and we now move into the question and answer portion of the hearing. I will begin the questioning with recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Let me begin with our energy security and energy affordability. Today, the United States is not as vulnerable to major oil disruptions as Europe or Asia, or as it was up into the early 2000s. And this is because of the U.S. oil and natural gas production. Wouldn't you agree with that, Mr. Secretary? Thank you. Oh, and if your mic, please. Clearly, impacts on global prices from the Iran conflict have impacts at home. Prices for oil, gas, and gas products have increased. What is DOE doing to mitigate impacts, and how do you see this playing out in the coming months?
Yes. Well, we've done a number of actions in the short term, which is first to coordinate globally the release of 400 million barrels of oil from strategic reserve in over 30 nations. We did this because we have an interruption of flows through the Straits of Hormuz. That's what the strategic petroleum reserves are for. The Biden administration, unfortunately, depleted our reserves to almost half empty for economic reasons. There were no disruptions in flows in 2022, yet they sold massive amounts of oil out of our reserves. We are not selling oil. We are trading barrels today when they're needed in exchange for 1.2 barrels later next year. We will end with a strategic petroleum reserve fuller than it was when this conflict started. I'm very proud of the president's effort to put to an end a 47-year conflict with the largest state sponsor of terrorism on the edge of developing nuclear weapons. We have changed regulations for gasoline blending this summer so we can increase the production of gasoline in our country. We have done all sorts of work with our refining industry and our natural gas producers industry to accelerate production to the extent we can. While I don't like the escalation of prices we have seen, today gasoline prices are $1 a gallon cheaper than they were 4 years ago in the midst of a Biden administration that was doing nothing to increase global security or assure the long-term safety of energy flows. This conflict with Iran, bringing it to an end, is removing the largest global threat to future energy supplies. Can we have a nuclear-armed Iran with a massive missile arsenal? No, we cannot. Proud of the president to not kick this can down the road, to take long-term energy security seriously, to take peace and prosperity in the Middle East for the United States as the front of the agenda.
Well, thank you. California is experiencing the highest gas prices in the continental United States, where it has limited its oil production, limited pipelines, and relies on 30% of its oil from the Straits of Hormuz. It also has closed many refineries over the last several years. What does this mean for consumers in California and across the West Coast?
It's ruinous what I lived in California for many years, absolutely ruinous what they've done to create an enfeebled energy island in the United States' greatest state, largest state, and the largest amount of our military resources are in the state of California. Yeah, it's over 50% imported oil, even though the United States is a net exporter of oil. Over 50% of the price of gasoline in California, it's $2 higher than the national average, is because of state policies. They have chosen to make energy expensive for their people. The net result of that is this state of amazing opportunity, amazing prosperity historically, today has the highest adjusted poverty rate in the nation. If the United States had these policies, we would be completely deindustrialized and on our knees.
Thank you. Let me turn to the prioritization, I got 1 minute to go here, of DOE financial assistance. Last year, the department conducted a portfolio review process. Will you explain the status of this process and how you see it improving energy reliability and affordability? And I only got 50 seconds.
Yes, look, as I explained in my testimony last year, it was heartbreaking to see that roughly $100 billion rushed out the door after the Biden administration lost the election. We had to review 2,240 projects, a number of them with no business plan, nothing serious in them, but promises of grants of money. We assembled a team to do it. Unfortunately, the leaders of those teams, my Senate-confirmed positions, the leaders of the departments across the energy, the Democrats in the Senate, for the first time in American history, filibustered every single one. I did not get the leadership of the departments until late October last year. Of course, I had to engage them in that process. But we did a rigorous process to see what projects are aligned with the mission to increase the supply of affordable, reliable energy to the American people.
Well, thank you very much. And keeping with the 5-minute rule, my time has expired, and I recognize the gentlelady from Florida, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, one of the reasons that hardworking Americans are grappling with higher energy bills right now is what you did when you took office at the Department of Energy in canceling so many clean energy projects and grid reliability projects. When you took office, you killed over 350 new energy projects and threatened over 300 more with termination. You were sued because of this, and you lost in court because of it. I don't think it's gotten enough attention that many of the grants you canceled were done so just because they were in states led by Democrats. Is that fair in the United States of America? For you just simply to make a political decision to kill clean energy projects, increase electric bills simply for political purposes?
So the statement is false. All of the 2,240 decisions we made did not involve politics at all.
Mr. Secretary, let me show you. I'm sure you've seen this. This is the district court stipulation signed by your representatives of the Department of Energy in federal district court that stipulates a primary reason for the selection of which DOE grant termination decisions were included in the October 2025 notice tranche was whether the grantee was located in a blue state. This is signed by your attorneys, and it's of course it is true.
Read your words more carefully. We're included in the announcement, not in the decisions on the projects. If you want to make accusations, please be accurate.
Are you going, well, talk about accuracy. You just said that gas prices during the Biden administration were higher than they are now. They are not. Boy, tell my folks back in Florida that are pulling up to the gas pump at $4.29 today.
Average was over $5 during the Biden administration.
And it's so arbitrary. You all have inflicted such pain and damage, and you can try to bob and weave on all this. But when a federal district court calls you out for your illegal cancellation of energy grants, hopefully you're going back to the drawing board to say, we're now going to right the ship. For the 7 projects that prevailed, have you released the funds to those energy projects?
Of course, we're appealing the decision there.
You're appealing the decision.
We cannot appeal it yet because we don't have a final decision on it. But look.
So then what about the other?
Do you want an answer or do you just want to speak?
Well, you said you're appealing the decision. So that means that as of right now, you're not. What about the other hundreds of grants to stabilize the grid, to help lower costs, to bring on new clean energy, cheaper energy technologies? Do you intend now, since the courts have said you acted illegally and arbitrarily, to actually restore those grants that were appropriated by the Congress?
Of course, we follow the law, always will and always have. But what you call clean energy, it's exactly the subsidies on wind, solar, and batteries that drove the 30% rise in electricity prices during the Biden administration and that drove the rise in electricity prices last year. Because the only things that could be permitted were energy sources that only work some of the time, and you don't know when they work.
Mr.
That is
Secretary,
a surefire way to raise electricity prices, and it did.
You're going to hear from other colleagues today about canceled projects that states and communities were relying on to help lower energy bills, and now you have said, no, we think it's more expensive to double down on costly, polluting plants. You know, the unabated burning of oil and gas and coal also has an outsized cost and impact. you can't turn a blind eye to the rising cost of the heating climate. And you continue to kind of bury your head in the sand on that. And you go back to all of these businesses that had fully permitted and even begun constructed projects. How does the private sector ever trust you again when you arbitrarily and illegally cancel these projects? How do you rebuild that trust?
They weren't arbitrary, and the legality are being disputed. You mentioned the rising costs of a warming climate. Over the last 35 years, insured losses as a percent of global GDP
I know insurance
have declined
in
20%.
Florida. I know insurance in Florida.
They've declined, not risen.
Yep.
The general lady's time has expired.
I'll yield back my time.
And the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky, the chairman of the full committee, for 5 minutes for questions.
So, Mr. Secretary, did you want to respond to more of what was just asked? I'll give you some time to answer some questions that you were just asked.
I think I made the most of the main points. She said, I hide my head in the sand. No one has ever accused me of that before. I'm very outward. I'm very honest about what we're doing. And to leave with this rising cost from climate, from a warming climate. The climate has warmed. We have put 50% more plant food in the atmosphere. That is true. But damages from extreme weather have been on a downward trend as long as we have data as a percent of the economy. So looked at realistically and honestly, there's not been an increase in hurricanes, floods, droughts, tornadoes, despite endless claims of it. And the losses as a percent of our economy have been on a downward trend because we build stronger, more resilient things these days.
And you also started talking about by subsidizing non-dispatchable power that only gave, what, 2% less than garbage and burning wood in New England. And people say, well, you just picked the worst day of the year when you use that comment. And I said, well, we need it the worst day of the year. That's when you need it the most. That's when peak demand. I said Churchill Downs has 100,000 seats for one day a year, but they need them that one day a year. And so it's important. So how did so the subsidies of wind and solar that some people claim will make power cheaper because you're subsidizing it, so somebody's paying for it, but it may be cheaper for the user, actually makes it more expensive because you can't permit it or they don't build other dispatchable power. How do the subsidies of wind and solar make energy go up?
Yeah, great question. I always say a subsidy is inefficient if the government collects $1 of taxpayer money and makes something only 50 cents cheaper. It's a waste of 50 cents. The subsidies for wind and solar, the government collects $1 of taxes and makes electricity more expensive, so it costs another $1. The losses are amplified by these expenditures. And the reason is, most of the time, right now, we have hundreds of gigawatts of excess electricity capacity generation on our grid. The only time delivery matters and sets the capacity of the grid is at peak demand time. How much we can deliver in our electricity grid is what we can deliver at peak demand. Wind and solar, and you saw it in Fern, go on vacation when you need them the most. So if the wind picks up right now and it starts blowing, the federal government sends 4-cent subsidy per kilowatt hour to that wind farm developer. We take a natural gas plant that's running and turn its power down because it's got to accommodate the wind power. We save 2 cents in the natural gas that's not burnt. We're already down 2 cents. Plus, the utility that contracted with that wind company pays them whatever their contracted rate was for it. We've added a whole bunch of new capacity, but we haven't expanded the capacity of the grid. We just have to operate 2 grids now and build all sorts of new transmission infrastructure. The states that have passed renewable portfolio standards and pushed what Representative Castor calls clean energy, they have 50% higher average electricity prices than the states that didn't force that. So we talk about clean energy or cheap energy. You've got to look at the system costs. We got to look at numbers, and we should look at facts. I know everybody wants to scream and make unbased accusations, but let's just talk about the facts today to the extent.
So I'm going to go. So for the next minute, Ford, I had a lot of questions. I'll send them for the record. But talk about. We know there's a crisis. There's high prices of energy. People are hurting. We can't have a nuclear Iran. I understand the decisive action and the reason for it. But at the Department of Energy, what is kind of going on in the next minute and a half that we can tell the American people we're trying to relieve energy prices?
Oh, all sorts of things. Look, on the electricity grid, we're doing everything we can to keep dispatchable capacity that we have today on the grid.
I mean, for gas prices today, what are you guys doing knowing that for this emergency, trying to do everything you can to make gas prices today cheaper I know we're going to get beyond this, but what are you trying to do today?
We meet every day with what are the knobs we can turn there. I mentioned the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I mentioned working with EPA to change the blending requirements so we can produce more gasoline this summer. We're looking at how we can expedite more American oil production from wells we already have. We mentioned the sanctions on the barrels of oil. They're floating barrels of oil in the Pacific Ocean that are on their way to China. Iran and Russian oil going into China where it'll be parked in a strategic petroleum reserve. China banned the exports of gasoline and diesel to the rest of the world. That oil doesn't help anyone. It's going to be sold anyway. So yes, we did talk to the whole administration and say, let those barrels of oil flow into India. They'll go into Indian refineries. They'll produce more gasoline and diesel and jet fuel, and they'll export those products to the world. We've done everything pragmatic, and we'll continue to do more things to keep that price of gasoline down. I'm disappointed it's up from the below $3 a gallon we were at,
I'm sorry,
far lower than it
Mr.
ever
Secretary,
touched.
I'm sorry, the time has
I
expired.
yield back.
You bet.
And the gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the ranking member from, for the full committee, the gentleman from New Jersey, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you know, sometimes I almost feel sorry for you, to be honest. I mean, you keep saying how the president has to show strength. This is the weakest president. He looks like a weakling. He talks about victory. Meanwhile, Iran, China, Russia, they just eat our lunch. That's the bottom line. He has to have the Chinese intervene to get a ceasefire. He wants to lift the sanctions on Iran, lift the sanctions on Russia. How is it that that's strength? That's weakness. But more important than anything is my constituents don't believe in this war. And the president keeps saying that the reason that prices for gas are going up and probably going to go up even further is because we have to fight this war. We don't have to fight this war. This war must end. And no one here is willing to sacrifice higher prices for everything for an unjust, illegal war. And I know you can't say that the war is unjust or illegal because you work for the president. I understand that. That's why I almost feel sorry for you having to be here today to justify what's going on here. But let me just ask you this. I mentioned that you tweeted, and this is a tweet, and I quote, "The U.S. Navy successfully escorted an oil tanker through the Strait of Hormuz to ensure oil remains flowing to global markets." And as a result of that tweet, the stock market and oil markets reacted sharply until the rest of the Trump administration had to come out and contradict your statement, which was then deleted. My concern is that the Trump administration is trying to influence the stock market, and that a lot of what they do every day is to try to influence the stock market when it comes to energy. And I'm hopeful that that's not for personal gain of the president or others in his administration, although I think there's a lot of evidence that that's in fact what's going on, because they don't want the market, they want to manipulate the market. So let me ask you, Secretary Wright, did you post this tweet yourself that I just mentioned?
I did not post that tweet myself, but I do take full responsibility for it.
Well, that's
I gave
fine.
a speech.
I appreciate, again, I feel sorry for you.
It was a mistake.
Crude prices tumbled below $80 a barrel after your tweet, before jumping again after it was deleted. If the post was an error by staff, have you done an internal investigation to ensure that the DOE staff involved were not trading on this activity? In other words, you didn't do it, somebody else did, did they make a buck because of it? Have you investigated that?
I'm not aware of an investigation of that, but of course I did speak to the people at my communications department that I spoke in Colorado. They misquoted something I said. It was an honest mistake, but it was my fault to not catch it.
All right.
To not
Well,
see
I
it
would
before
ask
it
that
was
you do a
posted.
little investigation because I'm concerned that they're trying to manipulate the market so they can make a buck, frankly. That's what I'm concerned about. Now, let me ask you this. In your opening statement, you said you were very proud of the progress made on nuclear energy by this administration. Frankly, I don't see it at all. I don't see why you think there's any progress. But moving to nuclear energy, DOE has threatened the independence of our country's nuclear safety regulator, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, according to press reports, which I'll ask unanimous consent to insert into the record, Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Without objection, so ordered.
At a meeting at Idaho National Lab last year, a DOE staffer named Seth Cohen said, and I quote, "The NRC is going to do whatever we tell the NRC to do." And you later promoted Mr. Cohen to be chief counsel for nuclear policy, and he spent much of the last year trying to actively undermine the NRC's safety rules. So let me ask you, do you acknowledge the importance of the NRC's independence? Do you think it's important that they be independent?
Oh, it's critically important that the NRC is dependent. It's critically important that we work closely together.
Then why is Mr. Cohen still on the job?
Mr. Cohen is a passionate guy working to advance nuclear power. He
He's not
gets
doing too well.
He gets a little over his skis, and he made a comment he didn't actually mean, but he did say it. He shouldn't have said it.
So you're
he
trying
understands
to say
that fully.
that he, even though he made that statement, he feels that the NRC should be independent as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, I don't believe that for 1 minute. Look, I want to be clear. Your department has a responsibility to uphold public confidence in nuclear energy, but critical to upholding that public confidence is maintaining an independent nuclear safety regulator, separate from the arm of the government responsible for promoting nuclear energy. And frankly, I don't think we're ever going to see progress on nuclear power on this administration unless that independence is secure, and I don't think it is today. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back the balance of time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Alabama's 6th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out that gasoline prices under Biden hit over $5 a gallon. It's the highest in history. When he took office, it was $2.39 a gallon. That's a 200% increase, Mr. Secretary. I just wanted to point that out. I want to ask you something. You're dealing with people here who claim to have the best interest of the country at heart, yet they're opposing policies that could dramatically improve the lives of people. We have economic injustice all over the country because of energy injustice that's been imposed on them. I understand that, having grown up pretty much dirt poor myself. These are the same people who voted against no taxes on Social Security for 51.4 million Americans. They voted against no taxes on tips that's added over $2,000 to the income of people, that they can go out now and buy their kids a new pair of shoes or pay for their school supplies, maybe take a little vacation, maybe even have some money for tuition for bettering their lives. These same people that voted against the Rural Health Transformation Fund that provided $50 billion to transform rural health care, particularly for expectant mothers in what have become maternity care deserts. So I just want you to know who you're dealing with. I want to ask you about, staying on the nuclear theme. China plans to build 100 nuclear reactors, probably by 2035, but certainly over the next 20 years. Can China compete in artificial intelligence only using renewable power?
Oh, absolutely not.
Can we?
Absolutely not.
So when it comes to, and you and I have had this conversation before, and you know how focused I am on small modular reactors. China plans to open for operation the first small modular reactor sometime, may already be open. The Linglong,
Already operating.
already operating. Are we in a position, the way we're currently structured with the National Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to compete with China?
I think we are rapidly moving that direction. I'm very, very proud of the commissioners we have on the NRC and the work they are doing. And we will have multiple reactors critical in the next few months. So I struggle with Representative Pallone's comment that we're not making any progress with nuclear. I think that's absolutely not the case.
Haven't we had these discussions where we're very focused on our ability to compete in artificial intelligence, to increase the baseload power available for this without raising rates on residential consumers and business consumers by using small modular reactors?
Absolutely, Representative Palmer. They're going to be a key part of what's going to power AI and allow us to reshore manufacturing. The ratepayer protection pledge we've done with all the hyperscalers, President Trump's leadership, will assure that electricity prices will not go up as we build data centers and we build new power generation. Nuclear is going to be a
Isn't
huge part of our electric
Isn't permitting
future.
reform absolutely essential to being able to build these facilities along with critical infrastructure that we need to remove our reliance on China for refined critical minerals and rare earth elements?
Absolutely, yes, it is.
Are we making progress there?
In permanent reform?
Right.
No. Well, there's dialogues, but no, we haven't moved there yet. At the agencies, we've done NEPA reform. The Supreme Court came down and gave us a unanimous decision in sort of a parallel issue. But yes, we need Congress to move real permitting reform so it's easier to build things. Otherwise, China will keep leaving us in the dust in electricity production.
And when we do permitting reform, when we expedite permitting, does that in any way undermine any of our environmental laws?
Absolutely not.
So what confuses me a lot of times about my colleagues across the aisle is they're opposed to permitting reform that would allow, if we do expedite permitting reform, it allows us to build the critical facilities that are literally critical to our national security and our economic security, even though expediting permitting will in no way undermine the environmental quality that we enjoy now or have many, many opportunities to improve upon, particularly if we go with small modular reactors. Yet they're in opposition to the very reforms that are going to improve our national security position, our economic security position, and make life better for Americans all over the country. Would you agree with that?
I agree with all you said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you very much. The chairman yields back the balance of his time, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from California's 50th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for coming here. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to take a break from the presidential campaign to ask you about some things I think we can work together on. First is fusion. I did read in your testimony some very positive comments about fusion. And I want to thank you for coming recently to the D3D facility in San Diego. As you know, that facility is a world-leading facility in the development of nuclear fusion. And fusion has made tremendous progress over the last several years, in part due to the work at D3D. The proposed budget request for FY27 reduces funding to its lowest levels in 13 years. And at this level, I just wanted to say it looks like D3D would need to lay off 30% of its workforce, cease infrastructure development, and go into a warm shutdown. I just ask you, can we work together to see what we can do to keep that facility open?
Yes, absolutely. I will work with you to keep that facility open. I'd like to see our efforts in fusion grow. I believe our numbers are flat year over year, but do I have an interest in actually growing that funding? Absolutely.
I want to call your attention to that.
I'd love to work with you on
and
that.
I know this is a dynamic document, but I want to call your attention to that and hope we can work on that. The other, thank you for Mr. Palmer, my friend, setting up permit reform. I think that's something I personally am interested in doing. And we've made a lot of progress in this Congress, and I'll just tell you where I think where the state of play is. Congress passed a NEPA reform, the SPEED Act from the Natural Resources Committee. I think there's a lot of good things in that. We are interested in transmission. I think we've talked about this before. There's so much congestion. I mean, even if you built a gas plant in PJM today, you can't hook it up. Microsoft wants to reopen 3 Mile Island, kind of a heroic thing around a data center. They can't apparently get hooked up until 2031. We have to build more transmission. And I think, you know, there are discussions going on, but we would really love the administration's active support in getting a plan to build out transmission as part of this deal. I think I would just call to your attention, there is concern around certainty. The notion that I know you're not big fans of wind. We have disagreements about energy policy. But pulling a plug on a project like Revolution Wind that's already permitted scares off investors and scares off people, and I think we got to get away from that. We just introduced the bill on certainty yesterday. I know the natural gas folks want relief from Section 401. Just for your information, that's a hard pull for Democrats, but it can't be done unless we write down the rules on methane. I think the industry is tired of being jerked back and forth on methane. That because of customer demand from the EU, from China, and from South Korea for clean gas, the industry's developed the technology it needs to be able to abide by methane restrictions. We need to write those down. Those are the kinds of things I would invite your attention to, and you think you would be able to work with us to get a congressional deal this year?
I do believe so. I think you raised a number of the key issues, and I do believe that there is room for a bipartisan agreement that addresses all of the issues you raised.
And
I would like to see that happen, and I'd like to work with you on it.
Thank you. I would say that you've indicated before there'd be value to permitting multi-state, multi-regional transmission lines similar to pipelines. So it's a one-stop shop at FERC. The process for getting through lines is much harder. Can we talk about a parity problem? So we're faster, more efficient transmission permitting paired with reforms to the environmental laws would reduce costs, improve grid reliability. Is the parity between permitting pipelines and permitting transmission lines something that you'd consider?
Yes, I think it's very worthy of discussion.
Okay, we really need your help to help kick this committee into gear. On the House side, you know, frankly, we have a lot of Republicans who've been really willing to step out without knowing what the Trump administration thinks and work in a constructive way. I think senators are more intimidated to do that. You know, if you and President Trump can indicate, yeah, you want permit reform and transmission planning has got to be part of it, I think we could come to a deal.
That's great to hear. Okay. Yeah, I look forward to those dialogues moving forward in the next few weeks, I hope.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Peters.
Well, thank you very much. Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 11th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary, it's such a breath of fresh air to have an expert, somebody who knows the business of energy and that represents all 50 states on affordable, reliable energy. And it's also nice to follow Mr. Peters from California, and I know that his heart is in the right place on wanting to work on permitting reform, which is a huge priority for us. I'll start kind of small in our district. Thank you for the work on nuclear. And you have made tremendous strides and gains. As opposed to the previous administration, you are working on this. And as you know, the project in Texas with Abilene Christian University, Natura Energy, I know that DOE has been working very closely with that. And there's a couple of benefits. Number one, it's the added dispatchable power that we, when scaled, are going to receive from that. But number two, it's also a water issue as well, that the heat from this reactor and the technology from this reactor can help on desalinization of water, especially in an area like West Texas where water is so critical. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that current project before going into some other ideas.
Yeah, I think that reactor at Abilene Christian is a perfect example about why we are going to have a nuclear renaissance this time. I would say at the federal government, we have commitment that we're going to do it. We're going to be more sensible on regulation. NRC is critical in that. We have great leadership at the NRC. I think they're doing great things. We are changing permit approvals in the DOE. We have used money appropriated by Congress. Thank you all, everyone here, for that, to spur new uranium enrichment, new fuel fabrication in this country. So we're doing everything we can from the government end, but we have great private efforts at universities and at businesses that are trying different and novel technologies, putting their own capital at risk, their time, their emotional energy into it. If you combine capital, emotional energy, innovation with a reasonable regulatory environment, you get progress. And I am very excited about it. We're not betting on one horse or one thing or reviving something that was old. There's so much exciting innovation going on, one right there in your district. I went to college to work on nuclear energy. I've never been more optimistic about the future of nuclear than I am today.
Well, thank you for that commitment. We do need the Idaho National Lab to deliver on their side of it, to really finish out that project. And I think it's going to be tremendously helpful for our country. Let me switch to the crisis that we have. And you mentioned California earlier, and I would put the northeastern United States in the same category. But I mean, California is going to end up importing from other countries because they won't allow via pipeline or via the refineries that are actually shutting down. There are multiple refineries that are shutting down in California right now because the state has made it so tremendously difficult to work there, to produce and provide for that population. So I want to tie that with the efforts that Department of Energy is trying to do everything you possibly can and maybe give us a sense of some of the solutions legislatively that we can be thinking about so that there isn't a disaster in those coastal areas.
It's serious concern about national security in California. Again, massive military assets there. We supply our forward bases in the Pacific out of the west coast of the United States. But yet here we have a state, not only does California have the most expensive electricity prices, they produce meaningfully less electricity today than they did 10 years ago, as does New York, as does Massachusetts. All the green energy states have expensive energy and declining output. California, 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago, produced 40% of America's oil. Today it produces 2%. 2% of American oil comes out of California. Yeah, and they consume closer to 10%. So they're just wildly dependent, not on imports from other states like Texas or New Mexico. They're importing oil from Iraq, from Ecuador, from...
There's going to be a day where they import more oil from Iraq than they get from the United States. And if that's not already today, then...
They import over 60% of their oil from out of the United States. Over 60% of the oil consumed in California is imported from across the ocean on giant tanker ships, and they import gasoline and diesel and jet fuel refined products. They can't even make energy out of it. They had 40 refineries. Now they only have 7 of any size. They're not going to be able to refine enough of their own products. So Pacific nations or some other state like Texas is going to have to make that quirky California gasoline blend designed to be expensive. I think that was the goal. Make it expensive.
Thank you for
Mr.
raising the
Secretary,
warning
I'm
flag of
sorry.
not being like California for the rest of the United States. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Wright, you state in your written testimony that the Department of Energy continues to be focused on turning our nation's abundance of resources into affordable, reliable, and secure energy for all Americans. What grade would you give yourself delivering on that promise?
I would have to grade the whole team, but I think the team has made massive progress in the last 15 months.
What grade would you give yourself or the administration?
I would give I can't give...
Okay, I'll answer the question for you. Gas is up $1 per gallon since January, and diesel prices are now over $5 per gallon. Electricity prices have risen as much as 13% nationwide since President Trump took office, and inflation tripled last month on the record gas spike due to the president's war with Iran. So I would give you an F, as I believe most Americans who are getting crushed by rising prices would. Let's talk about how we got here. Mr. Wright, following the Trump administration's and congressional Republicans' illegal war in Iran, the Trump administration granted sanction waivers to both Russia and Iran that allowed both countries to temporarily sell oil. Is that correct? There were sanction waivers for both countries. Is that correct, yes or no?
There were sanction waivers to bring that oil into Asian refineries as opposed to being stored in Chinese SPR.
The answer is yes. And these waivers come while we're at war with Iran, and Russia has continued its war with Ukraine. Is that correct?
Is your preference a nuclear arm?
So the answer is yes. So even though we're at war with Iran
Yes, your
and
answer is
Russia
yes.
is still, I'm reclaiming my time. Even though we're at war with Iran and Russia is still at war with our ally Ukraine, we've allowed both countries to benefit financially from Trump's war with Iran. Before Trump's war with Iran, was the Strait of Hormuz open, just yes or no?
Always at threat of being closed.
But it was open. And now it's not open, and Iran has operational control of it. And about 20% of global oil typically goes through the strait, which is about 130 ships per day. So Iran has operational control of the strait, and now a fraction of the number of ships are passing through. Prior to Trump's war with Iran, the average price of a gallon of gas was between $2.87 and $2.94. Is that correct?
Yes, much lower than ever during the Biden
And the average price of gas today is $4.13. Is that correct?
Lower than the peak of the Biden administration.
So that means that the cost of gas is up $1.20 since the start of Trump's war with Iran, which equates to Americans collectively paying over $20.5 billion at the pump. So let's do a quick recap. For the past month, Russia and Iran have reaped the financial benefits of President Trump's waivers on oil sanctions. The Strait of Hormuz went from open to closed, and Iran maintains operational control over the strait. Gas prices are up $1.20 since the start of Trump's war. So, Mr. Wright, from solely an energy perspective, would you agree that this war is an absolute failure that is being borne on the backs of hardworking Americans?
Adamantly disagree. Iran has been a threat to global energy supplies for 47 years, and we're finally going to end that threat. Yes, of course, there's some weeks
that has
of
not
disruption.
been communicated to the American people. The goalpost keeps moving, and meanwhile, our constituents are paying at the pump every single day. Mr. Wright, as the Secretary of Energy, one of your roles is to ensure the security of nuclear materials worldwide. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What is the status of Iran's enriched uranium?
We don't know exactly what the status of Iran's enriched uranium is today, and what I do know I won't share.
Iran is believed to have about 960 pounds of uranium enriched at 60%, which is enough to produce about 10 nuclear warheads. Is that your assessment?
Yes, it is, and apparently you want them to finish the job.
Well, that's interesting because last summer, President Trump initiated strikes on nuclear facilities in Iran, claiming that their program was, quote, totally obliterated and, quote, set back the program for years. So if you agree that there's 960 pounds of uranium enriched and that Iran's nuclear program was totally obliterated, how can those two things be true?
Because they produced that enriched uranium before those strikes in their nuclear program.
Okay. Let's talk about Venezuela. The Trump administration has used Venezuela's natural resources to exert control in the Western Hemisphere, including by cutting off the supply of oil to Cuba. And now Cuba has plunged into an energy crisis. The Trump administration has threatened tariffs on countries like Mexico have historically provided fuel to Cuba, yet the president allowed a Russian oil tanker to reach Cuba. Is that correct? That's correct. So the president allows Russia to give oil to Cuba while threatening everyone else who wants to help, and the president allowed Russia to profit off a temporary sanctions waiver even though they're still at war with the Ukraine. Mr. Wright, in your assessment, why is this administration so weak on Russia?
I don't believe this administration's weak on Russia. This administration's done the most efforts to get as close as possible to end the ruinous war in Ukraine.
I disagree, and at the end of the day, you can't tell the American people how they feel, and they are struggling right now because of this reckless war and this disastrous administration. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia's 12th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Hey, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank Chair Lina for holding this important hearing with our Energy Secretary Wright, and I really appreciate your work, sir. And I thank you for being here to testify today, even under these circumstances. I want to thank you for unleashing American energy and for working on getting more reliable energy on our grid. You know, it's too bad that my friends on the other side of the aisle didn't get so upset about gas prices under the previous administration. I don't quite understand the hypocrisy, but anyway, we have to deal with it. As part of that, nuclear energy plays a vital role, and I'm proud to highlight that my district is home to Plant Vogtle, the nation's largest and most advanced clean nuclear energy facility, with units 3 and 4 now fully operational. Nuclear energy is critical for our nation's energy security, and I'm glad that the Trump administration is promoting nuclear energy. I look forward to continuing to work with you on deploying our nuclear energy capabilities. The refocused Office of Energy Dominance Financing, EDF, is committed to the responsibility of deploying capital to projects that meaningfully contribute to energy security and lower energy costs for Americans. These are projects that can be built quickly and start making a real difference, generating electricity and a return on investment alike. Mr. Secretary, how can the EDF be utilized to expand existing nuclear plants, gas-generating plants, and grid components to build our capacity and usher forward the next generation reactors?
Boy, I love your enthusiasm, and yet congratulations for the huge nuclear resources in your district. 2 of our early loans from the Energy Dominance Finance Loan are for nuclear plant restarts, both the Palisade plant in Michigan and the formerly 3 Mile Island that'll be rechristened the Crane Clean Energy Center. Those are EDF loans from the Department of Energy in partnership, with solid corporate partners that are leading the effort and funding with equity. We're just their debt partners coming along with them. EDF loans will almost certainly be part of the first 5 or 10 new reactors that are built in this country. Commercial lenders will be right there along with us. And after we get that ball rolling again, I think the commercial capital markets will fill that role nicely. But there is an important role for us at the start. We need key equity partners, and we need the right projects. But the enthusiasm is high there, and I believe we'll get the nuclear ball moving again.
Well, we know we have got to create a whole lot of energy in this country. We're way behind, and I appreciate your work with the public-private partnerships to get this done. EDF recently approved the largest loan in DOE history, $26.5 billion for Southern Company, that operates the utilities along with other utilities in my district, to build a new generating units and upgrade existing infrastructure. This includes 6 GW and nuclear power improved through uprates and license renewals. What impact will this have on my constituents in Georgia's 12th district?
Maybe the most important thing it will have is it will stop the ruinous price rises that ran for the 4 years of the Biden administration, and of course last year as well. Everything that came onto the electricity grid, every impact on the grid last year was Biden policies. It takes longer to reverse those policies, those impacts. So it will stop the rise of electricity prices in Georgia and Alabama. It will grow massively the amount of deliverable electricity in those regions, which will allow new businesses, new manufacturing, data centers, whatever it is the great people of Georgia want in that district. It'll enable better futures, lower prices, higher wages.
And that's why this affordable issue is so full of hypocrisy. I mean, it baffles the mind. In February, the House of Representatives passed my bill, the Home Appliance Protection and Affordability Act. This bill makes several updates to the Energy Policy and Conservation Act to preserve consumer choice and affordability in household appliances. Should this bill be enacted, and how will the Department of Energy ensure that consumer choice and affordability and the fact that this stuff needs to work like it's supposed to be protected? And I got about 20 seconds, sir.
No, it's critical. We got to allow Americans to purchase what Americans can afford and what they want to buy. This sort of arrogant paternalism that you have to buy the expensive, fancy one that my friends in Manhattan have. Everyone has to buy it. That's what the Democrats did under the previous administration. Not a single loan they gave mentioned affordability or cost in the applications and in the plan. Not one.
And I'm sorry.
You have to
the gentleman's
reverse this
time has
HVAC problem
expired,
too, sir. Thank you.
and he yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California's 15th district for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. The war in Iran has sent the price of gasoline soaring, with the national average over $4 a gallon, up nearly $1.50 per gallon since the start of the year. Mr. Secretary, prior to the president's attack on Iran, did the Department of Energy model potential increases in gas prices?
Oh, the Department of Energy has engaged in the Iran question since the administration started. The risks from Iran, the risks from action against Iran, so absolutely.
And did President Trump consult with you directly about the impact his war would have at the pump?
Absolutely.
He did. So you're saying the president knew that this would trigger a 45% spike in gas prices for working families and proceeded anyway. So thank you for putting that on the record. Do you have an estimate for how long the president's war will raise gas prices?
I think in the long term, it'll be meaningfully lower gas prices because we're removing the greatest threat to global energy security that's been here for decades and was rising to a new level. A nuclear-armed Iran with a massive weapons arsenal is an existential threat to the economies in that region, to the countries, to the United States, and certainly to global energy markets.
Thank you for that.
This was a problem that needed to be fixed.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It offers little comfort to families choosing between groceries and filling their gas tanks, but appreciate that answer. I would like to move to a topic of innovation. My district in the San Francisco Bay Area is a global leader in commercializing breakthroughs for nearly 2 decades. The Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy, or ARPA-E, has been the federal government's primary engine for that same mission. It was designed to move at the speed of the private sector and bridge the gap between the lab and the market. You've talked about leading on critical minerals and AI and firm power generation. But instead of using ARPA-E to accelerate those goals, your budget proposes cutting its funding by 43%. This is at a time when China is spending over $1 trillion on R&D. So why are you proposing such significant cuts to your agency's engine, really, for commercialization?
So our request this year was flat with our request from last year. Last year, you worked with us to plus up that request, and I hope we have a similar pathway this year.
Okay, I would just like to note that we've heard about reorganizing and creating brand new offices to do the job ARPA-E is already doing. Is it efficiency? I'm concerned about the use of tax dollars with regard to that. And just want to say that ARPA-E is tech neutral. Its mission is to overcome, and I quote, long-term and high-risk technological barriers. If you want to change those priorities, you change the program directors. You don't fire staff, you don't gut the budget, but look forward to working with you on ARPA-E going forward. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I'm a fan of ARPA-E as well and look forward to working with you on it.
Gentleman yields back. And the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Ohio's 12th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Wright, for being here this morning. Mr. Secretary, in just the last few months, the Department of Energy and the Department of Commerce announced a historic $33 billion public-private partnership in the great state of Ohio. Thank you. As part of this partnership, SoftBank Energy will build out 10 gigawatts of new power generation, including 9.2 gigawatts of natural gas generation to power new data center development in Ohio. When completed, this project will include one of the largest natural gas generating facilities in the world, while at the same time protecting Ohio families and ratepayers from increased costs associated with new data centers. Can you discuss the department's role in establishing this partnership? And more broadly, how are you working with the administration to win the AI race while protecting Americans from increasing energy cost as outlined in the President's Ratepayer Protection Pledge?
Thank you so much for the question, Representative Balderson, and thank you for your great state of Ohio. In key part of the American industrial heartland in the past, and I believe very much will be in the future as well. So artificial intelligence and reshoring of manufacturing are going to have huge new demand for electricity. Those plants, those facilities need to go places where you've got skilled workforce, a reasonable business environment, and energy resources, most importantly, the ability to grow and expand energy resources. We looked at the Department of Energy. We have over 1 million acres at our labs and facilities we otherwise manage that have land, and we reached out to developers of data centers and said, hey, if you bring capital and compute to help our Genesis mission advance AI, we want to work with you. And so we identified that facility in Portsmouth, Ohio, a former gaseous diffusion plant that was part of the United States weapons program, but it had been decommissioned and has been in the process, mostly through, of cleaning up and reclaiming that area. So just a great location, a brownfield, to develop large data centers and large new power generation. The main funding for the power generation part of it is coming from the trade deal President Trump negotiated with Japan. Japan wanted more favorable trade terms with the United States, and in exchange agreed to invest hundreds of billions of dollars into the United States in assets that are funded by the Japanese government, but are ultimately owned by the United States. These will be managed by a great utility that serves that local area in Ohio. So we want to get going as quickly as we can, raise the power production in that area, so we can build the data center, build other industrial facilities that'll be around it, and freeze electricity prices at a minimum, and hopefully start to decline the rates in that area. That'll spur all sorts of other businesses. We had a wonderful event there, and the people that used to work at that facility were so excited that they and their children are going to, again, be able to work at great American industrial facilities in the heartland of our country.
Couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. In addition to the SoftBank project, Williams Companies is currently investing over $7 billion to develop a new natural gas fire plants, including the Socrates project in my congressional district that I'm fortunate to represent, to help power data center facilities in central Ohio. I believe gas production in Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania are well positioned to support this new development and investment in co-located and behind-the-meter generation. Can you briefly discuss how the department views the Utica and Marcellus shale as an asset in supporting your goals of American energy dominance?
Yes, again, fantastic. The shale revolution, that, as you know well, just transformed our country. It reset oil prices and natural gas prices massively lower. Oil prices in real terms were well over $200 20 years ago in peacetime. But shale revolution exploded American production of oil and natural gas. The greatest natural gas shale producing area in the region is in your great state, is in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Eastern Ohio. These resources are massive, and how much gas can be produced is limited by how much pipeline capacity there is, mostly to get it to the Gulf Coast, where it's loaded as LNG and shipped abroad, or pipelined around to demand centers across the country. But it's limited by pipeline capacity. So one of the beautiful ideas is a way to use more of that gas without having to build a very long-distance pipeline is to use it locally. Build data centers, build manufacturing right there in Ohio. Short connection lines can take abundant gas from the Utica Shale in eastern Ohio and build new factories, build new data centers, and Williams Company, who's a pipeline developer, says, hey, we can develop a short pipeline here and build massive infrastructure in the great state of Ohio.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Virginia's 4th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chair Latta and Ranking Member Castor, for holding this very important hearing today. As the explosion in energy demand from an increasingly digital world and AI increases energy demand dramatically, faster than our energy infrastructure can keep up, meeting this demand affordably, reliably, and in a way that balances the health of our communities, planet, its ecosystems, while ensuring grid security remains critically important to our national prosperity and our national security. And frankly, I've been very disappointed by this administration's inability to advance a coherent energy strategy that sufficiently meets this moment. Rather than encouraging the growth of cheap, reliable, renewable energy sources, the administration doubles down on increasingly expensive and inefficient fossil fuels, eliminates programs designed to reduce energy demands and help lower energy bills, and on top of this, the president's war of choice in Iran has sent energy prices soaring over the past month. Americans are now paying over $4 a gallon for gas and diesel over $5 per gallon, while 80 million Americans are struggling to pay their utility bills. And many of them are forced to choose between paying for food, medicine, housing, or keeping the lights on, as the price of each of those things have gone up and continue to rise thanks to the policies of the Trump administration. And it's this context, Mr. Secretary, that you're here to defend a budget that repeals $15.2 billion in support of a clean, reliable, renewable, and affordable energy system, plows almost $2 billion in funding to make costly upgrades to oil and natural gas plants, pipelines, and fuel storage infrastructure to extend the life of expensive-to-maintain, soon-to-be-retired gas plants, and a budget that cuts the funding for offices focused on energy innovation and novel technology to meet our energy demands. So, Mr. Secretary, yes or no? Do you believe that the federal government should help ensure that rural localities and small municipal grid operators can protect their infrastructure from cyber attacks?
Yes, we have made many of the changes in our policy specifically aimed at stopping the price rises of the previous policies and moving to more sensible policies. And yes, cybersecurity is major on our electricity grid, and we need to continue to get smarter at doing that.
And I agree with you that we need to help, particularly rural and municipal utility cybersecurity programs, and yet your budget zeroes out the rural and municipal utility cybersecurity program, and that just makes no sense to me. This is a vital program that this committee recently voiced unanimous support for that helps small and rural municipalities protect themselves against an ever-multiplying number of cybersecurity threats that could prove severely disruptive to those communities, rural communities like the ones that I represent in Virginia. They're under-resourced, they're underfunded, and this zeroing out of this budget is counterproductive to helping them keep their grid safe. Mr. Secretary, yes or no, do you agree that efforts to mitigate the impact that data centers have on regional and local grids will also help mitigate energy shortages and provide greater price stability for American families?
Yes, I agree with that.
I agree with you, and I represent the data capital center of the globe, as well as the clean energy capital of the South. And yet, as Secretary, you've overseen the cancellation of hundreds of previously awarded grants under the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And in Virginia, that has jeopardized over $233 million in grants that are focused on everything from energy efficiency to grid reliability. And one of those grants was to study ways that grid-enhancing technology could be used to reduce the impacts of data centers on local and regional grids. And being here in the DMV area, I'm sure you have read the news how Virginia is struggling with how to balance the need for data centers, the impact that they're having on prices, the impact they're having on demand, and the impact they're having on our communities. And yet, canceling this grant makes it difficult for the Commonwealth of Virginia to meet that challenge. And so these are just two of the cuts in this budget that caused me great concern. Based on everything we've heard today, there's a lot in that budget that causes great concern. And we're gonna fight to ensure that our localities have what they need to keep the grid safe, and that we meet this moment in a way that keeps energy prices affordable and reliable. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady's time has expired, and the gentlelady from Tennessee's 1st District is recognized for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Wright, for being here today. And I want to thank you for the department's leadership in building domestic uranium enrichment capacity through the NNSA's defense fuels programs in my district. And as part of that program, there's a site that's been elected to demonstrate DUCE centrifuge technology, which will ultimately support the production of highly enriched uranium for the Naval Reactors Program. It's NFS. And I know we spoke about this last year, but I wondered if you could share any updates on the program and how important that is to national security.
Yeah, we don't enrich meaningful uranium in the United States for commercial use or for defense program use. That's been true for a few decades, and of course, it's just entirely unacceptable. You've been a champion of this for years. I've been here for a year and a half as your partner in this endeavor, that we need to reestablish enrichment of uranium for commercial purposes, for military purposes in the United States with American technology and American companies. I'm happy to see that going. Funds that were granted by Congress, I think over 3 years ago, sat unused through the last years of the Biden administration. We ran a competitive process to find the best way to deploy that in multiple different technologies, multiple companies, and targeted at multiple different outputs. But those awards have been given. We're negotiating final terms. We want to see shovels in the ground and construction growing as fast as possible.
That's a big deal.
It's a really big deal. And of course, that money goes as well to the right winners, the right companies, but they choose regions like yours that have a long history in nuclear technology and nuclear innovation, because the workforce is there, the regulatory regime is there, and the ability to stand it back. Tennessee was absolutely critical during World War II to the atomic, to our Manhattan Project. It brought the war to an earlier end than it otherwise would have. I think saved easily tens of thousands, likely hundreds of thousands of lives, and ushered in a relatively safer world by America being the strong, powerful leader of the world. And we must do that again in the United States. We must have a strong deterrent, and we must have those capacities right here in our country, and a lot of it's going to be right there in your state of Tennessee.
Well, it is. We want that to be the next nuclear hub, is East and Northeast Tennessee. And honestly, let me go into the next question. Last month, the trade deal with Japan, with GE, Vernova, and Hitachi, when they announced plans to invest $40 billion in Tennessee and Alabama, building this SMRs, basically, that'll generate 3 gigawatts of power. How is the department going to ensure these SMRs are deployed quickly and affordably?
So we are in close contact with the folks at GE, at Hitachi, where is the state of the technology? How can we initiate helping them get long lead time parts ordered now, get permitting, and get that under construction as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
But I do think that Japanese trade deal brought some critical money to make stuff happen faster than it otherwise would happen.
Well,
But I think we got a great, think of what 3 gigawatts does, not just for Tennessee and your area, but for our country, as far as reshoring manufacturing and leading in AI.
Totally. Because TVA's partnered with Google for the data centers, and it won't be an increase in payer rates because of that. So I've got 1 minute, 13 seconds, and I will tell you this. I've heard from several stakeholders that AI could be the key to addressing many of the challenges our grid system faces. And the department's budgeted over $1 billion for AI and quantum. So can you speak to the potential for AI to help accelerate grid and transmission capacity? And in your view, what's holding that back?
Critical for the grid. The grid, and we heard a comment on this earlier, that 3 Mile Island is being turned back on, and the local utility or the local grid authority said, well, 5 or 6 years from now, we'll be ready to connect it up. We cannot do that. When these grid studies, because the grid is complicated, take forever to do, AI is going to allow us to massively automate that process. We're just going to give it a model and send an agent there. It'll be able to do these grid studies in 1/100th of the time, and we need that. We need quick answers on how to optimize our grid and how to build new resources.
I always worried about EMPs and things that, they had the EMP study, and I talked to a company today, so I'll probably have some follow-up questions for you about the modernization and the hardening of the electric grid with E1 and AFS protection devices. That's a worry too. Nobody talks about that.
Well, unfortunately, the gentlelady's time's expired, and we'll have to get that.
Thanks, Chairman, for reminding me. I'll yield back then.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Colorado's 1st District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, it's been a year since you were here last speaking to the committee, and I wanted to discuss a little bit about some of what the administration has done with respect to our shared home state of Colorado. On October 1st, 2025, DOE released this statement announcing, quote, Energy Department announces termination of 223 projects saving over $7.5 billion, end quote. The Colorado Sun reported, quote, Trump administration slashes $550 million in Colorado clean energy grants. Conveniently, about 24 hours ago, before you were scheduled to testify, we received a list of grants set to be, quote, retained or modified, some of which appear to be in Colorado. So we called the Colorado Energy Office and we asked them if they knew about this, and they said they hadn't heard a thing. So I just want to ask you, is it true that some of those grants to Colorado that were cut have now been reinstated?
I think that is true.
Okay, can you provide me, you probably don't know off the top of your head, can you provide me within like a week or so a list of those projects so that I can share it with our home state?
Yeah, my teammates are behind me. We'll do that. And
Thank
yet
you.
again, out of 2,241 projects, I'm not.
I understand, but
thank you.
I think they'd really like to know if and which grants have been reinstated. So are you aware that one of the affected grants was to be the Colorado Energy Office for Resilient and Efficient Codes implementation to adopt building codes that reduce pollution and which DOE itself projects would save Americans $182 billion on utility bills through 2040? That was one of the ones that was supposed to be cut.
Yeah, and Colorado has been leaning in on this. If you build buildings differently, you can have them consume less energy.
So that's
the problem
not
is
right, that's not my question. Do you know if that grant was reinstated?
I do not know.
Can you please let me know that? Because obviously, if you're going to try to have better efficiency and save money, that's a good thing. Wouldn't you agree?
It's just a trade-off. If you make houses too expensive for people to buy them, then the fact that they'd save energy if they could afford them. So it depends.
So are you guys
it's not
now
always a good idea.
Are you now regulating the cost of housing?
I've never regulated the cost of
I didn't
housing,
think
but I'm concerned about the cost of everything. The
Well,
cost
we
of energy,
all are.
the cost of
We
housing,
all-
the cost of
we-
vehicles.
So we all are, and that's why we're perplexed if you're cutting $182 billion savings from utility bills. Let me ask you my next question. DOE suspended over $25 million in weatherization assistance to the state, which helped low-income households reduce heating bills. So my question is, are those some of the grants that have been reinstated?
I'll have to look into that. Those are things we've looked at carefully. There were crazy things in these low-income heating things. You had to do the social cost of carbon. There was politics and nonsense in those things.
Well, we certainly don't want politics and nonsense, but
Great.
but however, that doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater and you just eliminate the grant, because wouldn't you agree low-income households need help with their heating bills, especially when heating is going up so much in cost?
Lifelong passion of mine is energy affordability.
Wait, that's an easy question. You can say yes or no.
I'm saying yes.
Great.
I've been frustrated by Democrats' constant efforts that drive up prices. I want
guess
to
what?
make it more affordable for low-income people.
Okay.
Are we aligned?
Well, we're aligned in theory. Let's see what the practice looks like. If the funding uncertainty wasn't bad enough, DOE also, and we actually talked about this last year, it actively meddled in the state's energy regulation. The Comanche plant in Craig was forced to remain operational despite plans beginning a decade ago to close at the start of this year. Are you aware that forcing that plant to stay operational for just 1 year is expected to cost $85 to $150 million?
The cost of grid instability and blackouts
No,
in
are
that
you-
particular region would be much larger.
Okay, did you know that the cost comes in addition to $200 million for a 145 megawatt solar project that now cannot come online due to the limited transmission from the coal plant?
And the generally has 6 seconds left.
Well, maybe he would answer it, or is he just stalling? Okay, I'll ask you my last question. Did you know the ratepayers are going to have to pay the increased cost?
Keeping coal plants on in America have kept our grid stable and ultimately keep prices down.
I can see why you don't want to have to answer that. I yield
And
back.
the gentlelady's time has expired, and just all members know, you've probably heard the bells, we have 11 minutes left in this vote. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon's 2nd District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. I've been working with your team on Bonneville Power Administration in the Northwest, and we need a new administrator. And we're extremely interested in finding someone who can assist in taking advantage of the enormous asset that the BPA is for the Northwest. I do not know how up to speed you are on this, but I'm guessing you're up to speed because you're from that part of the world. But can you share with us what your thoughts are when it comes to Bonneville Power?
Yeah, Bonneville Power is a critical utility and power asset in the Northwest. It's a huge power marketer. It controls huge utility infrastructure, transmission infrastructure. It is very important. We need, as strong as possible, a leader of that organization as we can get. We have some requirements from government salary limitations that have made it harder to recruit people from with existing utility executives in other areas, which is what I would like to do. But yes, we are focused on that. We need to find someone good who has the skills, who can manage that asset for the best interests of the people and businesses in that area. It's a very important job. I share your concern.
Yes, well, so I'm happy to hear you're enthused about trying to actually pay the new administrator what that job requires to attract a pool.
It would massively help us get a grade A leader.
Right, and I have introduced a bill doing exactly that and giving you the authority to adjust the salary to meet the need for that space. So good news, it was introduced, just dropped 2 weeks ago. So we'll be pushing that bill through, I hope.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That would be huge.
I'm going to shift for a moment from Bonneville Power to biomass. We have a terrific challenge in the West with fires, and we've had the inability to remove fuel from the woods because for many, many reasons. But part of the problem is the sheer scale of the problem. We have 30 million acres of trees just in Oregon. I think there's 35 million acres of trees in California and 32 in Washington State. So no one understands how much wood is there. It's an enormous challenge. It's also a challenge because of environmental issues and other things, but one of the newest things that's happening is the possibility of converting some of that biomass into fuel and into the type of thing we now are getting from corn, and hooray for that. The cost is significant, but it's being driven down as people get better at turning cellulose into a fuel. The reason this is so important is because we need some added value to the biomass that we're removing from the forests. In other words, if we can get the biomass out of the forest, we will drive down fire suppression costs. Yes. What I would be asking is the Department of Energy working with the Department of Ag to coordinate and say, look, we can get together on this. There are a bunch of hurdles we have to overcome, but I see this as a huge solution on both sides of the equation. More fuel in the form of, well, I think a lot of airlines are very, very interested in using this. What's your thought?
So I need to look into that. I'm not aware of existing efforts right now, but I am very aware of that problem, as I've written in the past about wildfires in the West. When we stopped wildfires from the 20s, the Smokey the Bear campaign, we dramatically reduced fires in the West. It was a very successful program, and then we stopped the ability to thin and control the forest otherwise. So there's more than 30% more fuel per acre in Western fires today than there was 40 years ago, right, which make wildfires burn so much hotter and so much bigger. We have to either let fires burn or manage the forests, and today we do neither. And so using that undergrowth or some of that thing and turn it into fuel is a very intriguing idea. Let me check into it with our team and with the Ag Department. If there's a viable pathway to kill two birds with one stone, that'd be intriguing.
I think there is. So I hope there is. And I wanted to thank you for your help. In my district, we have the Warm Springs Indian Reservation, and there was a power line going over it, and you helped us in preserving one of the grants that's going to help that power line be built, and that's going to inure into modest benefit to that tribe that's in my district. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the excellent job you're doing as Secretary. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Benson.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. There's about 6 minutes left in this vote, and there's 6 votes in this series. As mentioned earlier, as soon as the last vote, number 6, is called, we'll be resuming 10 minutes after that vote is called. So we will recess until after this vote series, and thank you very much. Pardon me. Jake, are you ready? We have a slight quorum.
Yes, sir. Well, you're
Massachusetts 4th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Secretary Wright, appreciate your testimony today. I want to associate myself, I won't recite them all, with the comments from Congressman Scott Peters of California about energy permitting and about this potential win in what has been otherwise a historically unproductive and partisan Congress. This is something that we can get done. I believe profoundly in energy sovereignty as a matter of economic and national security and of prosperity. And key to energy sovereignty is that we just got to make it easier to build stuff in this country. It can't take 10, 15 years with simultaneous and also sequential litigation and red tape. We got close to the right bill. I think there was good faith action on both sides of the aisle. I think that good faith action continues, but might need a spark, and I would really encourage you to help be that spark. And what he said about methane, about 401, I associate myself with all of it. I want to focus on the department's loan program, the Office of Energy Dominance Financing. It's a powerful funding arm for commercializing technologies like nuclear and geothermal, both of which broadly we agree on, by the way. For example, here in Massachusetts, we should overturn the moratorium on nuclear and we should build nuclear power. Massachusetts right now, our swing supply is oil from Yemen that transits Trinidad and Tobago. That is not energy sovereignty. We need nuclear. By the way, we also need offshore wind. So, we just had the coldest winter in 20 years. Our grid is now moving towards a peak winter grid as opposed to a peak summer grid. And the wind blows hardest in the wintertime, thousands of megawatts that could significantly reduce utility bills for my constituents. And this administration's attacks on offshore wind have been arbitrary and capricious. And I know that Republicans don't want those attacks to then be mirrored in the future against other politically unfavored energy sources. So we need to allow all energy sources to benefit from rule of law and certainty and stop this kind of tit for tat that's really just bad for energy sovereignty across the board. So I really ask for your support as Secretary in allowing offshore wind development to proceed according to due process and according to the state's wishes.
Yeah, I agree that I think there is room to make compromises across the partisan aisle to make a build so it's just easier to build things in America again. I agree with you. And I think now is the window to do that.
But the attacks upon offshore wind are proving a major source of contention in getting there. And it's not because individuals are necessarily boosters or bears on offshore wind as a source. It is the precedent that it sets. That when people put long-term capital at risk and then they see permits ripped up because one guy doesn't like how his golf course in Scotland looks, it's a really bad sign. And it's going to make it harder for energy investors across the board. We need rule of law. And we need it for utility bills in Massachusetts, and we need it, frankly, for energy abundance across the country. Let me return to the energy dominance financing, though. The office has roughly $200 billion in loan authority, over $100 billion in obligations. It requires competent staff and really a apolitical, technically competent staff. Under the last administration, administrative expenses were $120 million annually. I know that this administration wants to make cuts, but as Congress goes through the appropriations process, I'm hoping you can speak to the need for administrative funding so that the office can continue to function and help drive increased deployment of clean baseload power like nuclear and geothermal.
Yeah, the leadership we have there is from the professional lending world. So we want to run it more like a real professional bank and not a bureaucratic government agency.
Well, those people have technical expertise that commands a premium in the private sector, and so they're going to need, they need to be compensated, they need staff that is commensurate with that. We need competent people doing this work, because it's otherwise we're throwing bad money after bad if we don't.
I absolutely agree. It needs to be administered competently, and I feel we have a very strong team there right now. I'm open for any dialogue about that. It is an important instrument. I agree with you. It is going to help launch nuclear. It's going to help launch next generation geothermal.
Can you speak also, in my last 10 seconds, on the federal support restriction, whereby certain EDF programs cannot loan to projects that are expected to get any form of federal support? Obviously, if it's 100% federal support, it doesn't make sense, but any federal support?
Yeah, I'm open certainly to a dialogue on that. I wasn't around at the time that those rules were created.
Good. All right, I'll yield back.
Well, thank you very much. Gentleman yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Iowa's 1st District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Wright. Secretary Wright, given something that my colleague on the other side of the aisle just said, I thought you might want to respond. He was talking about ripping up the rule of law. And would you consider canceling the Keystone Pipeline in 2021 as perhaps considered ripping up the law?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Look, attacks on energy and attacks on building big things in America have dominantly come from the left. Desires to drive up the price of energy have been amazingly a political constituency. I don't say everyone's infected with it, but it has been rampant on the Democratic side of the aisle.
And certainly it's to the United States' benefit to have homegrown domestic energy. President Trump has certainly made it a pillar that we would have American energy dominance and American homegrown energy. And coming from a state such as Iowa in the Midwest and an agricultural state, biofuels, to me, emphatically fits into the president's agenda of homegrown domestic energy. So I'd like to get your opinion of where you think biofuels fits into the mix of any of the above and how that helps us, especially in this current global energy demand that we have and a lack of supply or a reduction in supply given what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, look, the United States is a huge producer of biofuels. We produce about 40% of all the planet's biofuels. And of course, your state, a huge leader in that. Our gasoline infrastructure today is basically based on having at least 10% of that liquid fuel content coming from ethanol. We don't have enough refining capacity to refine America's gasoline demand without ethanol. It's just part of the infrastructure now. And the question is, where does it go from here? Where are there areas for growth? Obviously, you need to have technology there. We need to have, cost competitiveness and all that. But yeah, as you just said, biofuels is a major part of American energy. It is.
Yeah, and given where Brazil is with 3 growing seasons, carbon negativity, and already producing sustainable aviation fuel, I have some concerns with the alternative fuel and feedstocks now housed under the Office of Critical Minerals and Energy Innovation, which is historically responsible for liquid biofuels and SAF-related work. The account was reduced by about 98% from $400 million to just $10 million. So given how exposed jet fuel markets are to geopolitical disruptions as we're seeing, can you help me understand how such a sharp reduction in liquid fuels innovation funding align with your vision and the president's vision of American energy dominance with homegrown American energy and energy security?
I think this is just figuring out scarce allocation of resource. This is an opening proposal from the administration. We're certainly open to dialogues about where focuses might be changed, where some things might be increased, some things might be decreased.
We certainly appreciate that. And then, Mr. Secretary, again, thank you so much for coming to Iowa to visit the Ames National Laboratory. I think when we visited there, we talked a lot about entrepreneurship. We talked about how you turn basic research into spin-offs and startups that reach high technology readiness levels and create new American companies. So I have a little concern over the ARPA-E funding, and I just wanted to get your take on ARPA-E's funding level and then how you feel that the funding levels are going to improve the return on federal research investments that then support an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem and new energy generation, perhaps.
Look, I've spent my whole life in energy innovation, in investing and innovating in the energy space. So, of course, it's near and dear to my heart. I think the track record of ARPA-E has actually been quite good. A lot of great innovations have come out of that because we bring private capital in together. There's small grants to sort of seed new ideas. I just came back from San Diego last week addressing thousands of energy entrepreneurs and capital providers in the room. So I would say, I would look at the administration position as we requested the same funding we had last year. Last year, you plussed up the funding of that quite a bit, and I would say I very much welcome that. I think what we got into the program, like a lot of the programs, if you looked at what was done in the Biden administration, just an embarrassing number of things were funded in there that had nothing to do with affordable, reliable, secure energy or making lives better for Americans. So the program had a bad name, even though it had a good history. I think we've got it back on track and definitely want to work with you. I believe strongly in the program.
I enjoyed listening to you at CERAWeek in Houston, and I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and the chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California's 7th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wright, since President Trump dragged our country into yet another endless war in the Middle East, the average cost of a gallon of gas in America has risen over 30%. Economy-wide inflation saw the biggest monthly increase since the COVID pandemic, and we haven't even begun to see many of the impacts. Fertilizer prices have risen nearly 50% because half of the global supply flows through the Strait of Hormuz. According to the Farm Bureau, 66% of farmers in the western U.S. are unable to afford fertilizer for their crops. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going to happen to food prices. Secretary Wright, last month you called rising costs due to the war, quote, a very small price to pay. When President Trump was asked about rising prices, he said, quote, I don't have any concern about it. If they rise, they rise. Yes or no, do you stand by those words?
I serve in this administration to drive down the price of energy, and when we arrived, we had an energy emergency. We've made enormous progress, but we are attempting to fix a 47-year problem to energy supplies and global security.
Reclaiming my time, you tried to downplay the long-term impacts of this war, but just this week, President Trump said the cost of gas will remain high through at least November. Do you disagree with the president?
I don't think myself or the president know what the future prices of energy are. The length of the conflict, during this conflict, we have elevated energy prices. It is a very unfortunate cost. I would say I'm proud. This is a massive conflict that's being resolved, and we're still $1 a gallon cheaper gasoline than the Biden administration had without a conflict.
Well, it seems like the message is pretty clear, though. The president doesn't care about the cost of the war in any way.
He cares every day we talk about the price of energy.
The Secretary of Energy doesn't care about the cost of energy for everyday Americans. Now, you can tell a lot about someone's priorities by looking at how they spend money. The president's budget proposes to steal $15 billion from critical infrastructure projects to prop up old coal plants and subsidize new fossil fuel power plants. Secretary Wright, where exactly would the funding for these gas and coal plants come from?
There's funding from in previous allocations for work on coal plants. Coal, during the Fern, the cold weather event we had here, was the second largest source of electricity in the eastern half of the United States. It's critical to the American electric grid. The closure of coal plants by the Biden administration, if we had allowed that to continue, hundreds of Americans would have died in the eastern U.S. in January.
Well, you're planning to reallocate almost 30% of your budget, and you can't tell me exactly where the money's coming from. Congress authorized that funding for specific purposes. You can't just do whatever you want with it. What authority are you using to repurpose this funding?
We have funding for coal. There's funding for carbon capture, which is a modernization of a coal plant. You have to have a working, viable coal plant to add carbon capture onto it. We're trying to follow the rule of law and the allocations of funds, but actually do them to drive energy prices down instead of drive energy prices up. And I think Americans are in favor of lower prices, not the higher prices the Democrats strove relentlessly in the last administration.
You said previously that you oppose subsidies. You said, quote, the wind subsidies and solar subsidies are 33 years old, so it's about time for industries to walk on their own. Well, the coal industry is well over 100 years old, but you want to give them billions to prop up old failing coal plants. Is that not a subsidy?
Not billions. There's a few $100 million from the reconciliation bill last summer, which is to help reverse the withering attacks coal has been under for the entire Obama administration and the Biden administration. And these are short-term modernization of plants. I don't want to have long-term subsidies for coal.
Okay, but it's still a subsidy. Your budget proposes to reallocate $750 million to upgrade our power grid with advanced conductors which can carry more energy and help meet rising energy demand affordably. I think that's a great idea. I fully support the use of advanced conductors, but the $750 million is already being used for that purpose under the Biden administration. In fact, that funding had already been awarded to California to support one of the largest advanced conductor projects in the country. California's Charge 2T project was afforded $630 million to install more than 100 miles of advanced conductors and deploy other advanced transmission technologies. But you illegally canceled the project. Why?
We looked at the specifics of the project to say, is it going to benefit American taxpayers? California produces less electricity today than it did 5 and 8 years ago.
Well-
California's done everything it can to raise the price of electricity and shrink the production of electricity.
My time. You gave the same
I'm sorry, the
justification for
gentlelady's
canceling
time's
hundreds.
expired. And
I will have,
if you would
I have a
submit
submit.
those in writing then.
Questions for the record.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 14th District, the vice chair of the subcommittee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Wright, we're delighted to have you here. Texas has a little bit of energy in it, you might have gathered, so thank you for that. On March 11th, 2026, President Donald Trump authorized the Department of Energy, DOE, to release 172 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I'm the upper Gulf Coast of Texas. We start the Louisiana border, come down on the curve all the way to Matagorda County. We've got 7 ports. 60% of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is in my district. Okay? So he authorized the release of 172 million barrels from the SPR as part of the IEA collective drawdown. A portion of that drawdown has taken place in Bryan Mound, that's the name of the SPR, that portion in Brazoria County, which sits directly in my district. Now, can you tell us, Mr. Secretary, how much oil has been sold to date? I don't know if you have those figures or not. And can you confirm how much more we expect to sell?
I think in our original round, we sold 42 million barrels, and we just had another one that sold like 26. So we've probably sold about 70 of the 172 million barrels that will be sold.
Okay.
And sorry, Congressman, if I can correct myself, we're not selling the barrels, we're trading the barrels. We're putting barrels into the marketplace now because the marketplaces need them, and all these deals are structured as swaps. So we get that oil back late next year. The first tranche, we get 1.2 barrels back for every 1 barrel we released. In our last deals, we got 1.25 barrels back for every 1 barrel we release. So at the end of next year, we'll have more oil in the SPR than when we started these releases.
Well, Texas is going to help with that, trust me.
Yes, you are.
Additionally, because it is in the interest of the federal government to be good financial stewards of the SPR, and I don't mean to be picky, but can you tell us what authority the DOE has to authorize that oil to be replaced? Is it just authority from the White House to conduct this?
No, we are the managers of the strategic, it's like the Federal Energy Act. I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the exact authority, but we are the managers of the SPR, and we are members of the International Energy Agency. We coordinated not just our release, but with 30 other countries.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear we're going to get the twofer, that you described, so that's good news. As you know, on March, well, let me do it this way. As you know, the traditional oil market is global, making price shocks unavoidable. However, we have seen a relatively stable stability in the U.S. natural gas market. Can you explain why the U.S. natural gas prices have largely been basically unaffected by the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, complete with Iran, it used to be at that helm?
You bet. And natural gas recently is now just passing oil as the largest energy source in the United States for consumption. Those two energy sources give 72% of U.S. energy, so they're the big two. Natural gas, we have just immense reserves in this country and immense production capacity. So to export it, you have to cool it and build these large LNG export terminals. We run those at capacity. So even though we are expanding our capacity, so we'll export more and more LNG, but the domestic gas consumers in the United States are pretty much completely isolated from this rising price.
Well,
the price of natural gas is less than 40 cents a diesel equivalent gallon today.
You're describing exactly what I'm hitting at. On March 30th, 2026, Golden Pass LNG, a company that operates in my congressional district over in by Beaumont, achieved its first production of LNG, which represents a major step forward toward fulfilling President Trump's goal of American independence. Companies like these provide thousands of direct jobs and billions of dollars back into our community. So how can we assure that economic opportunities like Golden Pass LNG coming online boosts LNG exports, at the same time benefiting local communities like those in my congressional district? Plans to make that even better for us, Mr. Secretary?
Absolutely. I visited a number of LNG export facilities. It is the fastest growing U.S. export. I think it will soon be the largest export from the United States of America's natural gas. It's the fastest growing energy source on the planet. Yeah. The future of natural gas is dramatic. We need to build these facilities to export it.
Let me break real quick at 30 seconds. I'd like to quickly go back to the SPR. Part of the rationale for drawing down the SPR is because we're experiencing an energy shortage. The president put in a 60-day withhold on the Jones Act. I'm sure you're familiar with that. So we would like to know what safeguards we're going to get put in place so that we can make sure that the integrity of the Jones Act stays in place.
They're restricted to only energy products as well. And frankly, what the waiver on the Jones Act is to get states like California that have made themselves an energy island so they can still get fuel during this crisis. The great energy sources from your region.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York's 20th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Wright, for your testimony before the subcommittee. I'll be honest that I have serious concerns about the priorities and direction of the department in the past 15 months, but I have limited time, so I'd like to focus on a few areas where I think that you may be agreeable. We know that energy costs are on the rise, and one of those things individuals can do to protect themselves from these cost increases is to invest in residential energy efficiency. The Weatherization Assistance Program is the department's largest residential efficiency program, allowing low-income households that receive services to save on average of $372 each year on their utility bill. It is my understanding that DOE still hasn't released the annual Weatherization Program notices, which are needed for states to apply for previously appropriated FY26 funds. This guidance isn't controversial. It lays out things like how much funding will be allocated to each state and how much money may be spent to weatherize each home. But without it, states can't develop their weatherization plans, and states' programs may be disrupted if it leads to significant delays in the release of funds. So, Secretary Wright, historically, this guidance would have been published by now. Can you commit to looking into the status of this guidance and publishing it as soon as possible?
Yes, I do. We've been working on the weatherization program this year as we did last year. We've tried to remove the things that make it more expensive. There was a social cost of carbon, like it was a decarbonization plan, not a low-cost energy plan. Last year, we removed some of those restrictions on the funding and released it last year. And it should be, I think, ready this year as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'd like to see what changes you've made to the program, too, if you could outline that. Last month, a new memorandum of agreement was signed between DOE and EPA regarding the Energy Star program. This voluntary labeling program helps consumers make informed decisions when purchasing energy-efficient appliances. After an initial proposal to eliminate the program last year, there was vocal opposition from consumer advocates and manufacturers. The administration has now indicated that primary responsibility for the program will move from EPA over to DOE. I did not see any mention of Energy Star in the DOE budget request, but EPA's budget justification states, and I quote, "In fiscal year 27, EPA will support the Energy Star program as administered by the Department of Energy. 1 FTE is allocated in this program project to support that work. Based on that, it seems that EPA is already preparing to end its responsibilities. Historically, the Energy Star program has required about $35 million annually. Again, a very important program. In light of the MOA and EPA's budget, is DOE seeking that funding as part of its budget request?
I'll have to get back to you on the details of that, but you started with saying a voluntary ratings on appliances. We're all for that. We're all for data, transparency.
Right. I'm more concerned about the funding that is transferred to DOE. Can you point to me where 35 million or more perhaps is contained in the budget for DOE.
Sir, I'll have to get back to you on that. I apologize.
Okay, well, right now I don't see anything in there, so it would be good to know where it's included. In light of the MOA and EPA's budget, we need to move forward and make certain that that request maintains its integrity. While my personal preference would be to continue Energy Star at EPA, can you at least give us some assurances that DOE is already working to put the people and resources in place to seamlessly transition and manage the Energy Star program?
I'll have to get back to you on specifics on the plans for that
You're not
transition.
sure
from
if we'll
joint-
have the resources. Well, finally, we know that electricity demand is projected to grow significantly, but uncertainty around the development of large load facilities like data centers is making it more challenging to accurately predict future demand. Forecasting methods across regions and utilities vary, making it harder for grid operators to plan effectively. We need accurate forecasts to ensure that generation and grid infrastructure are built at the right scale and speed to meet demand without risking unnecessary costs that will burden ratepayers. DOE has amazing analytical and modeling capabilities in its Office of Electricity and the national labs. So Secretary Wright, do you believe that DOE could do more to support grid operators, states, and utilities improve and harmonize their methods for forecasting electricity demand?
Absolutely. It is a major focus in this administration, is the grid stability, growing the capacity of the grid, all of the things you talked about. That is a big focus.
Well, then I'm concerned about the 21% cut to the Office of Electricity's budget that might undermine that ability. But with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Colorado's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Mr. Secretary, always good to see a fellow Coloradan. We'll just go through some quick stats here, and then I want to get your opinion on these. We know Colorado made less electricity in 2025 than 2024, 58,000 gigawatt hours compared to 56,000 gigawatt hours. We know that that's because, not my data, the Colorado Energy Office's data via a study that they commissioned says that Colorado's far-left energy policies are going to cost the state about $61 billion, and we know that's going to be passed on to ratepayers. And what's the result that we get out of all of that? Well, it's actually less reliable, more expensive electricity in the state of Colorado. You were out at our largest natural gas generating station in the state, in my district, just a few short weeks ago, where we talked about that reliability issue. We've had multiple public safety power shutoffs because the state and the regulatory burden in the state can't get out of the way of making safe, affordable, reliable base load generation, and instead want to pass $61 billion in costs on to ratepayers in Colorado. Boulder, Colorado is telling their businesses, go buy a gas generator because the state can't keep the grid on and we can't keep the lights on. And so, Mr. Secretary, my first question to you, when we visited that generating station in Colorado, we talked about that base load, reliable, affordable energy. Talk about how important that is, not just to national security, but also to the economy in terms of being able to keep the lights on and make rates affordable for ratepayers.
Yeah, look, the American electricity grid runs on natural gas, coal, nuclear, and in some places supplemented very nicely by hydro. That's how the lights stay on. That's how factories and things get built. But there has been a political and really anti-mathematical desire to put on intermittent, unreliable resources onto our grid, and everywhere their penetration gets high, the prices get more expensive, the grid gets less reliable, and the economics, and of course, as I discussed earlier, the subsidies that go into it undermine the economics of the reliable sources. So it is absolutely insane to see what the state of Colorado, the state of California, and under the Biden and Obama administrations, their desire to follow Western Europe and make electricity massively expensive and chase the industries out of our country and raise the prices on Americans. I still cannot believe these policies are still so passionately defended when we know the ruinous consequences of them.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I got 3 more questions, so I'm going to go quick here. We know we have to use not just current technology, but invest in future technology. We've toured Exemer, which is looking at fusion energy, so nuclear, but fusion, not fission. Can you talk about the DOE's goals to align investments explicitly for commercial scale fusion?
Yes, look, the progress in fusion, something I worked on as a college student, I'm super excited by. And what we're trying to do is use resources from the DOE, either in basic science at our laboratories, neutron survivability, which materials can we build heat transfer things that can survive the high energy neutrons from fusion reactions, and then partnerships with various commercial businesses with milestone bases. Hey, if you can get to here, we'll fund X amount. If you can achieve this milestone, we'll file more. So that we sort of, the funds flow to the successful businesses. But Exemer, I think, has a tremendous technology and idea, and I'm excited to see fusion become a physical reality in the next few years.
Glad to hear it. Talking about looking forward to the future, we know there's a lot of threats to our grid and to energy here in Colorado. We've got the National Lab of the Rockies, which houses the ETAC program, the Energy Threat Analysis Center. Can you just talk about what your department is doing to work with labs like the National Lab of the Rockies, that public-private partnership to protect our infrastructure?
So ETAC is critical because there's this facility we built in the lab where we have people from commercial utilities based there so that we can look at the grid on a broader scale, observe threats, see what we learn from how they are, and deploy lab technology to find ways to keep the grid more secure and more rapid grid studies to get interconnections done faster. So it's bringing together science, technology, and commercial enterprises to drive the progress forward of the electricity grid.
My last 10 seconds, you were talking about the Jones Act. Would love to hear your remaining thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very necessary thing to help tamp down the price of energy during these interruptions of flows. In fact, if you look at the last 2 or 3 weeks under the Trump administration, the price of energy has basically been flat. The flows are still cut off. I think we'll be out of this in a few weeks, and I think the navigation through it will be very successful.
Sorry to interrupt, but the gentleman's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 33rd District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, you're a very well-prepared man. I don't think that we have to worry about you quoting false scripture from Pulp Fiction today. I think that you'll have good answers for everybody. But I'm going to be direct. This budget does not lower cost for Americans. Gas prices have surged by more than $1 per gallon since January, and diesel is now over $5 per gallon. Electricity and residential natural gas are both up 13%, and that's happening against the backdrop of growing global instability. The administration's war with Iran has injected real volatility in the global oil and gas markets, and it's really driving a lot of uncertainty and putting upward pressure on prices. Now, if you want to understand what that means on the ground, you don't have to look any further than my home state of Texas and the Permian Basin. The Permian Basin, as you already know, is the backbone of American energy production. About 40% of the oil and gas production in the country, hundreds of thousands of jobs across Texas, and $10 billion in state and local revenue that funds schools, road, public safety, et cetera. But you cannot have energy dominance. And we talked about this before. You can't have energy dominance if you don't have an energy workforce. I think that is something that we would agree on. And right now, if you look, according to the Permian Strategic Partnership, the basin is facing a shortfall of about 175,000 jobs and workers that are going to be needed by 2040. And instead of addressing the talent gap, this administration's pursuit of mass deportations is actively hollowing out the oil field. You probably saw the video of the roofers in Midland that were being taken off the roof there by the fire department with ICE. In the Permian Basin, immigrant workers, including undocumented, are not on the margins. They account for about 20% of the workforce and essential operations. And when you round up workers from the Permian Basin, you're actually removing production capacity. And when capacity goes down, that means projects get delayed, costs go up, outputs tighten, and prices follow. It's really not that complicated. And so I want to make this very real. There was a worker in West Texas Oilfield services guy, years of experience, part of a crew responsible for maintaining wells, and he was detained during a routine traffic stop. Within a week, his crew was short-handed and missing deadlines, maintenance work was delayed, and his family and wife and 2 kids, U.S. citizens, lost their stable income. That is the reality behind the policy. And you are not policing the worst of the worst, quote, with rap sheets that are miles long. You're detaining hard workers, and we are telling these workers that they are essential when we need their labor to hit production targets, but expendable when it comes to their families. So Secretary Wright, which is it? Are these workers essential or are these workers expendable?
You and I have shared a lifelong passion about the American labor force and jobs and opportunity for people in oil fields, in rural areas, in all different industries. That I employed thousands of workers whose native language, were not born in this country and whose native language was Spanish. So immigration is critical to our country. The difference or the focus of our administration is legal immigration, not illegal immigration.
Have you been given any directives to let oil and gas companies know that y'all are only targeting individuals that are the worst of the worst, as the president says, or have committed crimes? Have you sent directives out to oil and gas companies in the basin to let them know that?
This is not my area of expertise. I'm about energy production and not about labor force and immigration. I understand your passion for the issue, but it's just not in my
But you do
portfolio.
understand that there are people that are undocumented that are working out in the basin. You know that as someone that has been a CEO in upstream energy production.
Yeah, I know that it exists. Okay. I would say it's a pretty small minority, though. You know, the vast majority of the workers that are from Mexico and Latin America that work in the Permian Basin and all across our country, the vast majority of them are legal.
And there are some jobs that they do that are actually where they do a high percentage of some of the harder and more dangerous jobs there. I want to ask you this in closing: as being a CEO of an oil and gas company, you you probably had a Gulfstream or a Lear. You probably were doing pretty good. Do you care about all of the employees that help you live that lifestyle, whether they're undocumented or whether they were here, that were out there working their ass off, busting it out there in the Texas heat or wherever? Do you care about all of those workers?
Absolutely. You go ask the people that worked with me, and I flew coach class my entire business career. No company pays for me to fly private.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The gentleman's time has expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas's 12th district for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for being here. Let's talk about affordability, as my friends across the room like to talk about. And it goes with gas prices, but more importantly, gas taxes. Every state is not equal, is it?
No, the differences are pretty dramatic. We've made maps on this, and they look like political maps. You want to know where gasoline's expensive, where electricity's expensive? Look in the blue states. Same energy resources in this country. They are political choices across this country in blue states to make electricity expensive and to make gasoline expensive. So yes, it's a little rich when I hear this preaching that we are, the Trump administration, who came in here to drive down energy prices and have actually been enormously successful in that regard. One of the biggest challenges we have is pushing against the blue state policies that insist on impoverishing their own people, insist on preventing resources from getting into their state. I'm glad they're converts now to energy affordability, and if we can have the Trump administration work together with politicians in blue states, wow, we can do great things. But this is a newfound conversion for me.
And let's be more specific. The #1 state in the nation with the highest gas tax, California. I actually was watching a TV show the other day, and the reporter was aghast of how high the tax or gas prices were. And it made the impression that it was a nationwide average. So, I mean, when you have policies like that, specifically in the state of California, the #1 state with the highest gas tax, it makes a difference to those Californians who are trying to make it every single day.
Oh, it does. And it's more than the gas tax. There's all sorts of regulations and overlays on the production of gasoline in California that drive it up. Yes, they have the biggest gas tax, but how do they achieve $2 higher than the national average? That takes more than just high taxes. but they add on and add on. In fact, they're adding on a new carbon tax, which is what's pushed out 2 of the refineries they have. Imagine what energy prices are going to have when you can't even refine enough. And you got to ask refiners in Vietnam, which they are, will you produce California blend gasoline? We have this weirdly expensive custom blend. We wanted to make it for us in Vietnam and then ship it across the ocean. And then we're going to call ourselves green as we sell our wildly expensive gasoline to our consumers and are proud of our highest adjusted poverty rate in the nation. My guy, we heard Congressman Evans talking about my state of Colorado. And what does my home state of Colorado want to do? Full of abundant energy resources, everything they can to drive up the price of electricity, gasoline, and energy of all sorts. These are political choices, expensive energy.
It's a choice, and therefore affordability, and the consumer at the end of the day is going to pay higher prices for all that when you have those policies in those states.
Reduce life opportunities, reduce health opportunities, reduce job opportunities.
And you touched upon natural gas earlier, of course, being from Texas, incredible producer of natural gas. Talk about if we were able to expand that and put that in pipelines across the United States. And when the Keystone Pipeline's approved and then you don't build it, the effect of that on many of our colleagues, constituents up in the Northeast.
Pipelines are a major part of energy affordability, a major part of where factories are going to be located, where data centers are going to be located. You're so right. I was in New York 2 days ago. We have not built a pipeline that crosses state boundaries in this country for something like 8 years. That's outrageous. And there was a belief that with the power Democrats have, we may never build another interstate pipeline. I came into this administration saying we must fix that. And why must we fix it? Because New England, 6 states and New York State have ridiculously high energy prices, and they're next to an amazingly abundant low-cost supply of gas in Pennsylvania, but they've somehow put up their hands that they don't want a pipeline to bring them more of it. It's their largest source of electricity. It's their largest source of industrial fuel, and they want to pretend they don't like it and stand in the way of it. We could dramatically lower prices and create jobs.
It's also leading the people of America to think that pipelines already don't exist across our country, when they actually do, all over.
Millions of miles of pipelines. It's why America has the great industrial past we've had, the energy massively more affordable than European nations and so many nations around the world. But yet
I've got 15 seconds. I want to follow up on Congressman Pfluger's real quick. SMRs, do we have any timeline of when you think the first SMR in America may come online?
Well, we will have reactors critical, SMRs running by July 4 of this year. They won't be plugged into the electricity grid selling electrons. That's probably still 3 years away. I hope we get electrons on the grid during the Trump administration, but that's an aggressive goal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Washington's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. First, I respect the noble goals of making energy more affordable and more abundant. And so it pains me that since you were last here making those promises, things have actually gotten worse from the perspective of my constituents. You've heard from nearly everybody in this room about how families are struggling to pay their bills, and much of that is because the price of utilities and gas are way up, especially in the last 6 weeks or so. Since this administration took office, my constituents are paying 17% more on their utility bills in Washington state, outpacing even inflation, which is at its highest level in 2 years. And this war, President Trump's war in Iran, continues to drive up costs, not just at the gas pump, but also at the grocery store and with airline flights and everything else. And he continues to also put American lives at risk. And as the president has thrown us into this expensive and dangerous foreign war with no end in sight, our service members and my constituents are being forced to pay the price. It's really going to take all of us in this room to rein in this president and his erratic actions. As prices continue to climb, I was hoping we would see more actions to make energy more abundant and lower prices. You've talked about some examples, but I'll tell you that several months ago in this committee room, I expressed some frustration about this administration's policy of forcing coal plants to remain online, even if plans for closure or transitions were already underway. And specifically, I spoke about the Centralia coal plant in Washington State, a plant that had stopped energy production from coal, was in the process of transitioning to natural gas, and then had to pause. And so just yes or no, are you familiar with the Centralia power plant?
I am a little bit.
Okay. It is a plant, like I just described, that was scheduled, had already stopped producing energy from coal and was in the process of transitioning. And now it's been sitting idle. It still costs money to keep it there and idle and keep the employees there. My constituents are paying the price, and it has contributed zero energy to the grid. Are you aware that it still is costing money to ratepayers and that this power plant is producing zero energy?
What is the right way to transition a plant from coal to gas is to build the gas infrastructure and have the gas ready by the time the coal shuts down, so you don't take firm, reliable electricity off the market. That's what drives blackouts. That's what drives electricity prices to go up.
So it hasn't been producing. We rely on hydropower. We are getting by just fine, but there is a predicted need for this by 2028, which is when the gas-powered plant was scheduled to come online. Like, everything was well-planned and underway. And, I guess what I would like a commitment from you on is that you will look at this and you will stop the pause order on this, because it was scheduled to come online when we predict to need that energy. And your department may be actually putting us more at risk.
Of course, we will look at that again, but I will tell you, if there was an order to keep the plant open, it was for a reason. It was because there was a grid reliability study or something that showed a risk of closing that coal plant. We would have had hundreds of people dying in January of this year if we had carried out the coal plant closures that were needed and they were agreed to.
You should be selective. We did not have that crisis in Washington State. We have great energy planning. We knew it was, in 2028, we could be at risk. It was not producing energy. We rely on hydropower. In this particular case, it should not be a blanket order. And I believe that this is because of our president's obsession with coal. And I'm frustrated by the answer, and I hope you will consider not having a blanket rule and
We
allowing
have been
this to go
selective. It is not a blanket rule, and yes, we'll look at it again.
Thank you for looking at it again. The other thing that I just wanted to mention with my 30 seconds left is that Hanford is a real priority in Washington State. We're worried. The process is underway for vitrification and dealing with the cleanup of chemical, toxic waste, radioactive waste. But one of the really important elements is that some of these tanks are leaking. And it's really important to monitor groundwater, because those toxins, the chemicals and the radiation are approaching the Columbia River, and that is the lifeblood of the Northwest. The president's budget, your budget, zeroed out groundwater monitoring for safety there.
I'm sorry, the gentleman's time has expired.
I would like you to look at that and repair the budget so that we can protect the Columbia River. Thank you. I yield back.
Submit that in writing. Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina's 7th District for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, thank you for being here today. South Carolina is a proud nuclear energy leader, and there's a strong interest in expanding nuclear power at existing sites, such as the VC Summer plant, which was at one point a bad word, a 4-letter word in South Carolina, is now kind of undergoing a renaissance. They do that to support reliable baseload power in our state's growing economy. However, affordability obviously remains critical. NRC licensing reforms under the ADVANCE Act are important, yet cost, supply chain issues, financing, and grid integration remain major barriers. As I know you're fully aware, the nuclear renaissance is here, and certainly South Carolina is a leader in that effort. I understand that the DOE is planning to develop with a state or several states nuclear life cycle innovation campuses. This is a promising initiative to help secure our nuclear fuel supply and address our future disposition needs. There is a final disposition piece associated with the request for information, though. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act, as amended, clearly states that only Yucca Mountain can be considered for a final long-term repository for high-level waste and spent fuel. Will the DOE engage the Energy and Commerce Committee or Congress generally on statutory changes to expand that? Or tell me about the parameters here on what the Department of Energy was thinking on that request for information.
Yeah, I think it's likely there'll be a necessary engagement on the statutory laws regarding long-term waste disposal. What we're developing is a solution that'll ameliorate or remove the need for Yucca Mountain, and I think there will be a comeback to say, hey, this is the right way to deal with the problem, and if there's necessary changes in the laws, we'll come to work with you to achieve those.
Okay, so you envision a scenario where it would expand beyond Yucca?
Absolutely. I don't think the long-term waste depository in this country is going to be Yucca Mountain. That government decided to place it there and impose it on people, and they rebelled against it. As you know and laid out, we went out to said who's interested in hosting these nuclear life cycle innovation campuses. 28 states came back and said, pick us, we're the place, we'll do it. And it's great. We're going to have a strong competition for that, and we will have multiple, I think, locations where we've got strong public support, huge economic benefits for fuel fabrication, fuel enrichment, fuel reprocessing, and long-term storage of spent fuel rods.
Thank you for that. Customers of our nation's nuclear utilities, including many of the citizens in our state, half of them actually, have paid tens of billions of dollars to the Nuclear Waste Fund to pay for the disposal of nuclear fuel. And the balance of that fund is about $50 billion. Can you assure my fellow South Carolinians and really the country that the NWF dollars will be used for disposal-related activities strictly as they were intended?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the intention. You know, this is a growing problem in a state like South Carolina that has so many nuclear resources. Federal government was supposed to have had a repository in the previous century. We need to get on that. We need to deliver that. We need to use the funds that were allocated for that to get the mission done.
Thank you, Secretary. Building off the ADVANCE Act, though, the NRC is moving to expedite licensing on existing sites, which is welcome. It's great news for predictable regulations. Licensing should not be a huge, major barrier to deployment of safe designs, but supply chain timing and cost can also be the barrier. Can you talk about the efforts of the Loan Office to help reduce those supply chain costs for long lead nuclear components? Is there a large role for the Department of Energy here? And additionally, how will DOE safety authorizations work to assist NRC commercial licensing?
Yes, yeah, we work very cooperatively with the NRC. In fact, on this advanced reactor test program, these small reactors we're going to have critical this year, we have a number of NRC employees detailed over to DOE working side by side with us. We have authorizations for safe operation of these plants, but not for long-term commercial operation to sell electricity. That's the business of the NRC, but we're working together to get test reactors going so the DOE and them can see them. We're working to get enrichment stood up in this country, fuel fabrication up in this country. As you rightfully mentioned, the supply chain is just atrophied because we haven't built any nuclear plants in a long time in this country, with the exception of Vogtle 3 and 4. And we need to get that industry stood back up on. And the DOE is playing a very active role, both with financial grants, with regulatory reforms, with loans, everything we can to get nuclear moving again.
And I think you're right, Mr. Chairman. I know my time's expired, but there's a very excited ecosystem out there of people who are ready to see nuclear again in this country. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Texas's 7th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Well, thank you, Chairman Latta, and thanks to you and Ranking Member Castor for this hearing. Secretary Wright, I am glad to have the opportunity to ask you questions again today and appreciate you being here to answer them and accommodating the kind of crazy schedule we have. I'm really glad to get these questions in before the votes start again. And we've covered a lot of ground here today. I can't and won't have time to revisit all of it, but there are a few things that I have heard today in this hearing that I want to touch on briefly. And early on in the hearing, Secretary Wright, you testified that the administration is releasing from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in response to high prices, and contrasted it with the releases from the SPR during the Biden administration. And I think you said that there were no disruptions in the market during the Biden administration to justify releases from the SPR in contrast to today, but I think you misspoke, because certainly you know from your years of experience that it's a global market. And in 2022, there were disruptions after Russia invaded Ukraine that set off a series of supply disruptions in Europe and beyond that affected global prices, as did our decisions here in this country and in this Congress to sanction Russia for its illegal war. And so I do think that's important context. If I had a lot more time, I would talk about how I had a bill that I introduced during the first Trump administration in the early days of the COVID pandemic to fill up the SPR when oil prices were record lows. But I have to move on. We did not do that then, and I do wish we had. I do want to touch briefly as well on part of your exchange with Congresswoman Castor, where she raised questions of trust and how industry can trust the process, right? And trust the government that they can make these investments that they want to make, that we need them to make, if grants are made and then revoked, if permits are made and revoked. Congressman Auchincloss talked about it a little bit as well. And look, I disagreed with President Biden on revoking the Keystone Pipeline permit. I disagree with President Trump on revoking the wind permits. And these issues transcend just one administration, right? I mean, the issue is whether folks in the industry can trust the United States government to be a reliable partner. But we should be doing everything we can to make sure that that is the case, because you know better than anyone, we need these investments and we need the US government to be a reliable partner and to know the rules, no matter who's in charge. And so that's the issue you're hearing on this side of the aisle, is revoking all of these grants and these permits. It is a huge challenge. And I know this because of the people that I represent in Houston are a lot of the people doing a lot of this work. And, you know, as you and I have discussed in this room before, I'm lucky to have their expertise informing the work that I get to do here in Congress. So I know that for years, for decades, energy professionals have been contemplating what would happen if Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz. And, you know, others have been talking already today about kind of the state of the world. So I'm going to skip over where we are. But even the Dallas Federal Reserve Energy Survey, industry executives were saying that the war in Iran is wreaking havoc in the industry and that it feels like we've lost control of the Iran war. And if the strait doesn't open soon, we're looking at oil at $170 a barrel. So we have a real issue in front of us. And I was surprised to hear, I'm definitely going to run out of time for questions here, but the president said twice that Iran's retaliatory strikes against the Gulf states and the Strait of Hormuz were a surprise to him. He said they weren't supposed to go after all these other countries in the Middle East. Nobody expected that, and we were shocked. Now, Secretary Wright, I saw your exchange with Representative DeLauro yesterday where she asked you that question. You said you did anticipate this possibility, and frankly, that makes a lot more sense. I saw Secretary Clinton say this was in every war plan, every scenario they anticipated. So the president's statements make no sense, but I want to ask you a few questions about this. I know I'm going to have to submit some for the record, but were you consulted about the possibilities and potential outcomes in invading Iran?
Yeah, of course, I've been in dialogue with the president across the administration about the Iranian problem and potential solutions to the Iranian problem. So yes, of course we've been in dialogue about that.
And the closure in particular of the Strait of Hormuz?
Yes.
Okay. And did you know?
He did not think it was a surprise. He thought it was a surprise. The President Trump thought it was a surprise that Iran would attack Oman, that Iran would attack Azerbaijan. Iran attacked countries that have not been foes of them immediately. Nobody expected them attacking every country in the region.
I'm going to run out of time.
The closure of the Strait of Hormuz was not a surprise to anyone.
I'm going to run out of time here, so I'm going to have to yield back. I'm going to submit questions for the record.
The gentlelady would suspend. We're trying to get the other members in before votes start. So if the gentlelady would like to submit her questions to the record for the witness, we'd appreciate it. She yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady, the at-large member from North Dakota, for 5 minutes.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Secretary Wright, thank you for your leadership and for your clarity on energy policy for our country. You are better able to express the connection between policy, cost, national security, and quality of life than just about anybody I've seen in this environment. So thank you for that. Every time we have one of these hearings, I find myself sighing a lot over comments being made by my colleagues on the other side. And I'm always reminded of the Ronald Reagan quote. And he said, "The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so." And when it comes to the energy policy that they're advocating for, it just isn't so that a green energy grid that is reliable. If you want it to be reliable, it will never be, based on today's technology, cheaper. It just can't happen. It just won't happen with today's technology. And so it's very frustrating to hear claims that the costs that are going up are the result of our policies when we just absolutely know that it's the cost of the policies that have been pursued very aggressively by the left for the last 10 years that have resulted in, that basically dismantled our power grid and are resulting in this significant price spikes across the country. So it's absolutely dishonest, and I really appreciate your consistency in pushing back on that. The solutions are pretty clear, though, and you guys are pursuing them. We need to stop retiring resources that are already on the grid. When we had Jim Robb here from NERC just a couple weeks ago, he said, still, we're facing a reliability risk. We don't have enough power to meet demand as it is today, so we shouldn't be stopping to retire. You guys are doing that with your efforts. Thank you for that. I'm trying to back you up with some legislation that would do just as you had said in your conversation with the gentlelady from Washington. Before we retire existing resources, we should have the new ones connected to the grid and ready to go. That's just what Americans expect. We should optimize what we have already, which you're also doing with your investments in high-capacity grids, et cetera. Again, I have a piece of legislation to reinforce that, so would appreciate your advocacy on that behalf. And then grow. I just want you to talk a little bit about your efforts to help grow our energy production, especially as it relates to enhanced oil recovery. In the Bakken, which you've been to North Dakota, thank you. We have a declining curve of production. We need some new technology. We're investing in carbon capture and enhanced oil recovery. I would like to hear your thoughts on that and what kind of promise it has for places like the Bakken and other of our oil and gas resources in the country.
You bet. Thank you, Representative Fedorchak. And yes, you've been, as a fellow energy nerd, you've been a great partner on these dialogues because you care about energy and you do the math. And so that's been a great partnership.
Thank you.
So again, I know you know this stuff, but when we produce gas from shales, natural gas, we can get 40, 50, 60, 70% of the gas out of the rocks. It's awesome. When we produce oil, a more viscous, much more viscous substance through these very low permeability rocks, we under primary production, normal production, we only get about 10% out. 90% is still in the rocks. You and I know we're not gonna leave 90% of that oil still in the rocks. I started my career in California working in oil fields at the time that were from the 1910s and 1920s. Oh, they'll be done in 20 years. No, technology evolves and production continues to move along. And the same thing needs to happen and will happen in shale. How do we get the other 90% of the oil out? There's lots of different ideas. We're gonna test them. North Dakota and the Bakken Shale will be one of those key test areas. We're gonna inject ethane gas. We're gonna inject propane gas. We're gonna inject CO2. We're going to find what's this right formula that's going to let us get another 5 or 10%, doubling the recovery of oil from the Bakken. Will it be injected in the same well as you produce or inject in offset wells? How will we, this is research and technology, but this is what America does. This is what North Dakotans do.
And pardon me, the gentlelady's time has expired. Let members know we're with 10 minutes and 38 seconds left in the vote, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio 6th District for 5 minutes. No, he came in at 1:30. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan's 10th is for 5 minutes for question.
Ohio, that's blasphemous, Mr. Chairman. Blasphemous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this very important meeting here today, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. What we saw during Winter Storm Fern should be a wake-up call for Michigan, because when the grid was under maximum stress, the truth became very clear. Reliability is not theoretical. It's tested in moments like these. Look at New England. At the peak of the storm, they were relying on wind and solar. They were burning fuel. They weren't relying on wind and solar. They were burning fuel oil for 35% of their power, natural gas for 32%, and even garbage and wood to keep the lights on. Wind just produced 2%. Solar, effectively 0. Now think about that. Even if you doubled wind capacity, you're talking about 4%. If you doubled solar, you're still at 0% when the sun isn't shining during winter storm. These are not reliable sources when you need them the most. And let's be honest about the environmental reality. Burning archaic fuel oil, wood, and garbage for power is far worse for the environment than modern natural gas or nuclear energy. That's not the example that we want to follow in Michigan, but that's exactly the path that Lansing's net zero mandates are pushing us toward. They are forcing reliable thermal generation off the grid while flooding the interconnection queue with intermittent wind and solar that clearly don't perform during peak demand. At the same time, we're seeing those efforts to shut down critical pipeline infrastructure like Line 5, which would weaken energy supply and push Michigan closer to the same constraints that New England faces today, where limited pipeline capacity forces greater reliance on fuel, wood, and refuse during emergencies. So we're replacing dependable power with conditional power and secure infrastructure with uncertainty. That's insane. That's how you create a reliability crisis. NERC has already called this a 5-alarm fire, and Michigan is directly in the impact zone. We should be learning from what happened in New England, not repeating it, because the next storm is going to hit, and it's not going to be about ideology. It's going to be about whether Michigan families have heat, whether Michigan families have lights, whether our grid holds up under pressure, and whether Michiganders can actually afford it. Right now, we're moving in the wrong direction, and we are going to change course, hopefully with your help, Mr. Secretary, and the Trump administration. So really quickly, during Winter Storm Fern, we saw exactly which resources showed up when Americans needed that power the most. You've spoken about the importance of reliability during that storm. So my question is this: how do aggressive state net zero mandates, which are accelerating the retirement of dispatchable generation, align with your responsibility to ensure grid reliability, especially in regions like MISO that are already facing elevated risk?
So they're directly contrary to that objective. Directly contrary to that. Thank you for your fantastic exposition of how energy actually works. And they're justified in the name of climate change or net zero. They're almost completely irrelevant in that world as well. Almost completely. California's gone way down this road, and what does it mean? It just means industry left California. The emissions just left California with the businesses and the jobs, and electricity overall in the country is about 20% of energy. In California, it's less than 15%. So they reduced the carbon intensity of something they strangled. And it's still biggest source of electricity is natural gas in California, hydro, and imported power from other states. So thank you for your passionate championing of just, let's do the math. Energy is about humans.
Energy is about humans, and we are about common sense. Something else that's about common sense, if you can expound on this really quickly. Your financing arm spent billions of dollars prioritizing intermittent energy projects like wind and solar in your predecessors' years. Now, as we move forward toward energy dominance under your leadership in the President's agenda, can you discuss the priorities of the Department's financing programs to shift to firm support of dispatchable technologies and domestic critical mineral supply chain?
Yes, yeah, we want to support things that'll lower costs and increase job opportunities. It's pretty common sense. So we're supporting the restart of 2 nuclear power plants, uprates on hydro plants, construction of new natural gas plants, extending the life of existing nuclear plants, making conductors so electricity can move around more efficiently. But in summary, the biggest objective when we evaluate these loan opportunities, what's the impact going to be on increasing the supply of electricity and decreasing the cost? Just those 2 objectives. Does it give us more electricity? Does it lower the cost? The Biden administration, this same loan program office, never considered the cost impact of electricity, and almost everything they lent on was going to reduce the production of energy. So it's basically a 180.
Thank you for your leadership. My time has expired. Thank you,
The
Mr. Chairman.
gentleman's time expired and yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania's 13th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman Latta. 250 years ago, American freedom was founded in Pennsylvania. And now, 250 years later, Pennsylvania Energy is allowing America to be once again energy dominant. I want to applaud you, Secretary Wright, for the work that you're doing at the Department of Energy, because under your leadership, Winter Storm Fern, earlier this year, the use of emergency 202C orders during this extreme weather event allowed our electrical grid to withstand significant spikes in demand. Make no mistake, our grid survived this most recent storm due to generation from coal, from natural gas, and from oil. These reliable, dispatchable power sources are essential, yes, essential to grid stability. That is why I was proud to see the recent DOE announcement, along with EPA and the Department of Interior, on the groundbreaking of the Northeast Supply Enhancement Pipeline. You and I know that pipelines transmit energy safely. On this committee, I have long advocated for the Northeast to utilize the abundant natural gas that is underneath the feet of my constituents in Pennsylvania. For years, political obstruction has prevented the build-out of the necessary infrastructure to make what is truly a common-sense solution. As a result, the Northeast has suffered. They've suffered from high energy prices, and in cases of demand spikes, have been forced to import foreign LNG rather than relying on domestic energy produced in my home state. Lack of natural gas infrastructure even saw New England turn to burning trash for power when wind and solar proved unreliable during this recent winter storm. Your work and President Trump's work to secure the necessary permits to move this project forward corrects years of inaction. And as you can tell, I'm excited to see the benefits of this completed project and what they will provide into the natural gas producers in Pennsylvania. Secretary Wright, can you talk about how the American energy dominance agenda aligns with our national security goals?
Yes, indeed. And thank you for your leadership in Pennsylvania, Congressman, and thank you for the great state of Pennsylvania. It has been, as you said, an energy powerhouse from the start of our country. The modern world began with the mining and harvesting of coal. Life expectancy grew, life opportunities grew, women were liberated. The world became a massively better place because of the arrival of coal, changing the social structure and the economic opportunities of our world. And then today, it's moved, coal is still critical. During the Winter Storm Fern, as you said, it was the second largest supplier of electricity after natural gas. Number 1 was natural gas. Number 2 was coal. What is Pennsylvania big in? Number 1 and number 2, nuclear power as well. So yes, if we can have affordable, reliable, secure energy in our country, we can reshore the industries we pushed overseas. Everything that we import from China and overseas in Asia during COVID, well, we can't get that stuff. That's because we pushed that manufacturing out of our country with affordable, reliable, not just electricity, but home heating and process heat. We can reindustrialize our country, bring those jobs in critical manufacturing back into our country. We can lead in the next energy-intensive manufacturing industry, which is artificial intelligence. And Pennsylvania, of course, is perfectly suited to be a leader of that because of your energy resources, and if you can bring common sense energy policy and reasonable permitting, wow, I think you're going to see a boom in your home state.
Secretary Wright, what further steps do you feel should be taken, specifically regarding natural gas, that allow the abundant reserves in Pennsylvania to be utilized in the Northeast?
Well, as you said, the reserves and the technology and the workers are there. Oh my God, you could double production in Pennsylvania. Right now, the limit is pipelines. There's only so much gas that can be moved. That's how much can be produced. So this Nessie pipeline is going to help New York City and Long Island. We also need the Constitution pipeline that would also come from your state of Pennsylvania and bring gas to upstate New York and all 6 New England states. Lower the cost of electricity, allow jobs in manufacturing in the New England states and upstate New York using gas from Pennsylvania. And of course, you can have all sorts of manufacturing and other demand centers in Pennsylvania to use this, God-given resource you sit on top of.
Thank you again, Secretary Wright. Thank you for your leadership at the Department of Energy. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee to continue to advance our shared energy goals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Well, thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. And seeing no other members wishing to ask questions, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for appearing before the subcommittee today. Members may have additional written questions for you, and I remind members that they have 10 business days to submit additional questions for the record. And I ask that you could respond as best you could in 10 business days upon receipt of the questions. I ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the documents included on the staff hearing documents list. Without objection, so ordered, and without objection, the subcommittee is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.